Live on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. Back to our normal digs here.
Not in
And
horrible Randy land.
And, of course, the same time as well. We did throw some people off that apparently missed the announcement that we were... we actually thought we were going to try to... I mean, we thought we'd be a little bit late, but... yeah, the whole streaming thing did not work out. So
the YouTube would not run on the little bit of internet that we found in Vegas.
No, indeed.
Even with like Wi-Fi hotspots from cell phones and whatnot.
No
bueno.
No way. Hello, Baraki. Welcome in the chat. I guess I can send out the social media blasts too.
Oh, you forgot that too?
Yeah. Well, I have them all prepped. I just forgot to send them out before going live.
Forgot to click send.
Yes, and then I can drop something in the Discord as well. All right. So, yeah, we are here for a book club. It has been a minute since we did a book club because July ended up flip-flopping us and getting us all out of order. And we used the Randy Land vacation as an excuse to flip back. And so here we are. It's been a minute. I think it's been almost about a month since our last book club, if memory serves. I think it was going to be around a month last time we finished off. I think I still have the calendar up here. Let's see. The last one was, early September. So it's been well over a month.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute, but we are back and ready to dive on in. Let's go ahead and hit the intro real quick and get the podcast people started because this is just the YouTube side now that I have the blast sent out. Let's go ahead and hit the intro and get started.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Go then. There are other worlds than these. Death, but not for you, gunslinger. It's time we had our own palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set, and blew. Child Roland, to the Dark Tower came.
We are Ka-Tet, one from many. Let the palaver begin.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's magnum opus, the Dark Tower series, as well as the entire King universe. My name is Tad.
And I'm Peter.
And we're here for our 6th book club for Wizard and Glass. We were just saying before we went live on the podcast side, as we were in the YouTube side, it has been well over a month since our last book club because July flip-flopped us to where we were doing book club's first episode there, and then we are now correcting it because of the Las Vegas trip to Randy Land, to the Escape Room. We used that because we wanted to kind of do that also somewhat aligned. It was only a few days after our 8-year anniversary. We are now past our 8-year mark, which is crazy to think about. I mean, I guess it makes sense. There's been a lot of podcasts. We've covered a lot of stuff over the years, but it just doesn't feel like 8 years for some reason.
Yeah.
Like in internet years, that's like centuries.
We're old.
Yes, indeed. I mean, of course, there's the first generation people that are probably closer to 20 years, but took us a little bit longer to jump on the old podcast bandwagon. But yeah, we did that, so that flipped us back here to where the book clubs are back in the second episode of the month, and we have this one to cover. We're on part 6. Also, I did want to point out before we dove in, I am very glad this worked out the way it did.
What is that?
Because I jumped into a reread of the series. I am currently starting book 5, and
so you just reread this,
the whole book, yes. So,
yeah.
But the good thing is because it actually kind of screwed me over. Is Amazon has this bullshit where all their shit's linked.
Yep.
So there was, like, for instance, before this, I was reading The Stand earlier in the summer. I think I had some stuff in between, but I was reading that, and there was a few different times where, like, whether it be subreddits or something, someone would question something, and I'd pull up my Kindle, search out the exact reference, and then pace it to them, go and hit play on my Audible, and suddenly I am there where
you were with your Kindle.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, they connect the two together. And normally, I think it'd be good because that would kind of give someone the ability to, whether they're reading on their Kindle or their phone and listening, and they're just trading off, it would fall. It's a really cool thing.
It's like intuitive, yeah.
And the fact that they can do that technologically. But for someone like me, or like if we were, for instance, doing this book club and I was maybe toward the end of this book, doing the prep for the episode would have been a hell of a nightmare for me. So I'm certainly glad that I was able to finish this book in between
before we had to do the book club,
in between roundtable or book club episodes, because Amazon love their technology in some ways, but for podcasters it is not a good thing. So I'm glad. But let's go ahead and dive in. We are currently still in part 1, which is titled Riddles, chapter 5, Turnpikin', and we are starting off in subchapter 11. And also, I do believe unless we get really tangent heavy, we are probably going to be diving into the next chapter in this one here. So for OCD people, it's gonna...
We didn't do the intro.
Oh yeah, I guess we. Yeah, see, I'm all thrown off.
You got a little bit ahead of yourself with your catching up story.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. So first of all, no spoiler warning. We have a spoiler section at the very end. We will warn you about that both on screen if you're in here on the YouTube side and audibly if you are listening. There will be no way to stumble into the spoiler section. It is saved to the very end. Then if you want to find us, you can find us on Apple Podcasting. You can stream us on Spotify. You can find us on Amazon Music and Audible or any podcasting service out there. You could subscribe, rate, and review us on any of those. We'd appreciate that. And if you want to join us live, you can do that at youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. If you're over here, if you want to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, we would appreciate that. It helps us out with the likes and the subscriptions for sure, but ringing the bell helps you out in case we do move things around. You'll always know when the episodes are coming. And I'll usually try to post something like a text note. YouTube allows like text notes, so you can go into our channel and you can see a note. So if there's anything that changes, I'll try to post it there as well as our normal social media stuff. Then if you want to find the show notes, you can do that at darktowerpalaver.com. We don't really have show notes for book club episodes, but if you want to find all of our past show notes for roundtables or our questions for new listeners, we find that a good primer for new listeners to introduce yourself to the Ka-Tet. The extended Ka-Tet. You can find those questions over there. You can answer one of them, all of them, or anything in between. If you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. There you get access to our Discord server where you can chat with us throughout the week in between the weeks between episodes, as well as, I mean, we've had all kinds of conversation. House of Usher has obviously been a big discussion point, and it's spooky season, so it just seems like the perfect time for King shenanigans, as well as we have our monthly hangouts. And then if you want to find us on social media or contact us, Peter can let you know the best ways to do that.
The best way is to email us. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com is our old email. Our new one is going to be show@darktowerpalaver.com. And then our social medias is our Twitter is @darktowerpod. That's @darktowerpod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. Our Instagram is darktowerpalaver, all one word, no spaces. And then check out our merchandise. It's tpublic.com/user/darktowerpalaver. Like Chris called out in the chat saying Peter wearing his appropriate TIC. Absolutely right. That is the way to go. You can also get it in like a sticker.
If
Books,
you
pillows,
want the
like
non-slanderous
that,
one, you can
truth that is Tad is terrible.
If you want the non-slanderous one, you can get the regular logo as well.
I did just notice that in the video, if I slide just a little bit, I think this way. Nope, the other way. I can cover up Tad's name, and it'll say Peter is terrible.
Oh, yeah, because the icon on the screen there.
So.
Which you've gotten a few of those over the years.
A couple.
Yeah,
not nearly as many as you. Baraki says not slander if it's true. That's what I always say.
I don't know about that. All right, so yes, now that I am not jumping ahead, we are in part 1, which is riddles. We will probably be jumping into we don't jump into part. Or yes, we do. We will most likely be jumping into part 2 in this episode as well. We basically thought we were going to be able to wrap this up evenly and then jump into the next section. But this book is significantly longer, so...
I was telling my wife about this. I'm like, there's so much meat on this bone.
There's
a lot.
There is, but also there's just more pages as well.
Yeah.
There's a significantly increased page count. So we always kind of have to slightly adjust as a new book comes. And this one, at first, we actually had one episode in this book where the percentages we normally do worked out. but none other one has. So I think that was just an apparition. But now we are back figuring it out. But we are here in Chapter 5, Turnpiking, Subchapter 11. The last thing we had is Roland and Eddie just talking after Eddie had a nightmare about Roland destroying the rose. And he basically told Eddie the one of the biggest takeaways I remember was told Eddie that Eddie should watch him anyway, even though he says I would never betray my journey, and I don't think that I would betray you all again. I think that's beyond. I think that's in my past. But he says I do bear watching. So that's where we left off in subchapter 10. Now we're into subchapter 11 of Turnpiking.
And as the new day dawns, Eddie's looking at the thing he spotted before, the thing across the road that they've been talking about off and on. He still couldn't tell what it was, and to him it seems like another riddle. And he was so damn sick of riddles. Roland was packing up their gunna, doesn't seem concerned with the thing up ahead. Eddie tries to guess how far away it is and thinks it's hard to guess since he doesn't know how far you can see in this flat land. One thing he is sure Jake was right about at least two things. It was some kind of building, and it was...
Sorry. I was trying to find a dark mode. I think I was screwing everything up.
Oh, it's okay. And it was sprawled across 4 lanes of highway. How else could they see it? It would have been lost to the thinny, wouldn't it? Maybe it was an open patch, or maybe the thinny ends before the building, or maybe it is a goddamn hallucination. In any case, put it out of your mind, he thinks. Got a little more turnpiking to do. But still a building holds him. As Eddie is looking at it, he thinks that it's like an airy Arabian Night confection of blue and gold, except he thinks that the blue is borrowed from the sky and the gold is from the rising sun. And so I just stopped here and I said, Eddie seems obsessed again. He always has to seem, gets easily obsessed, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think that goes along with like kind of the junkie mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people that tend to be more addictive personalities will fixate on things. Wasn't he also because this kind of reminded me as we were talking about this building last time and into this time, it kind of reminded me of book 2 when it was the third door, right? Or no, the second door. After, because he brings Eddie through the first door, and then Roland sees it before he does, and then he won't tell him. He's like, do you see something ahead? And he's like, no, do you? He's like, and then he just kind of like brushes him off, type thing. So,
well, it also reminds me of young Henry and young Eddie, where he keeps badgering him about Dutch Hill.
Yeah,
like
that's just a kid thing, though, right?
Was it though? I mean, it seems like we have a pattern from Eddie constantly badgering people about things and wanting to do things and stuff like that. And
I just picture the Simpsons kid. Can we get a pull, Dad? Can we get a pull, Dad? Can we get a pull, Dad? And I know I did that a number of times as a young child too. So there is somewhat of an element that maybe you could excuse Eddie as a child there. But if he's
not necessarily like a super young child though. We're not talking like 6-year-old here. We're talking like junior high Eddie. So.
Oh, you think I gave that up in junior?
Maybe you didn't, because hashtag Ted is terrible, and you drove your parents crazy. But
nothing wrong with that.
The gray hair that she has now might disagree with you.
All right. So then my note here, I don't blame him. I do the exact same thing on trips, and there's something to fixate on. I do fixate on it. And in fact, it seems to be, and the fact that it seems to be in the road is very unusual.
Yeah.
Because I mean, honestly, when you see something in the distance, it's usually off the side of the road. How often is there actually something that looks like it's in the road?
The only thing I can remember is like those times where you have the freeway and it curves, but you don't see the curve, and then there's something there.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, we curve before we get there.
Yeah,
but this is very clearly in the road.
Like here, it would be like a mountain, right?
Yeah.
And but in general, it's just like one, you'd have to have something that's big enough to see from a long, long distance, and generally speaking, something that big is not going to go over the free. It's like an overpass, right? Overpasses are so small, you don't really see those until you're getting close enough where you know, oh, it's an overpass.
Yeah.
So this is definitely unusual. So I think
it's clearly very, very clearly sitting on the road. Like they can see that clearly enough.
Yeah, that would trip me out just because it is so absolutely unusual for what we've normally seen in our world.
So going on, Eddie calls over Roland, and Roland, who's busy packing Susanna's pack, stretches his back and says, "Gods, one would think that no one in this band has the wit to housekeep but me." And he says they pitch in just like they always do. But first, come take a look at this building. Roland only gives it a quick glance as if he doesn't want to even acknowledge it. Eddie asks if it is made of glass. Roland glances at it again and says, "I wot a phrase that seemed to me mean reckon so, partner." Eddie says that says they have a lot of glass buildings, but they're like office buildings, and this looks like something out of Disney World. He asks Roland again if he knows what it is. Roland says no, and Susanna asks why doesn't he want to look at it. Roland does take another look then, but again, a little more than a peek, and says if it's trouble, it's in our road. We'll get there in time. No need to live in trouble until trouble comes. Jake asks if they will get there today. Roland says there will be water if God wills it. Eddie says he could make a fortune writing fortune cookies. He was hoping for a smile at least and got none. Roland simply walked across the road and shouldered his pack. When they were ready, the pilgrims resumed their walk east along Interstate 70. The gunslinger led with his head down, watching the toes of his boots. So Eddie's still just pushing to know things right away. I noticed Jake and Susanna aren't pushing nearly as hard, although Susanna does ask about, do you know what it is? Like you just not want to talk. Why don't you want to look at it? But then Jake asks the more important question of anyone's asking: is it trouble? Like, are we going to be in trouble, kind of thing?
Yeah,
but they're not pushing Roland nearly as hard as Eddie does. And like you pointed out with like the doors and everything like that, he does always seem like that kind of person where it's like, okay, I need to know the answer. I need to know it now.
Yeah. What I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and I couldn't, is what was Roland's reaction when they were looking at Ludd in the distance? Was he a little bit more nonchalant towards, like, whereas, obviously Eddie's obsessing about, it looks like
I think it was pretty much the same,
like,
where it's like, hey, we'll see it when we get there.
Yeah, and outside of like the few times when he's like, maybe we do have to go around it or whatever.
Yeah.
But overall, like, yeah, Roland, I think, is aware of what's ahead, but I don't think he ever really like fixates on what's ahead. Not that he needs to, really, right?
Yeah.
He's also he's proven very capable so far up to where we are now. The first three books up to what we've seen so far, he's very capable. I don't think he has to really worry. I think people that worry maybe are ones that have to have more time to adapt to things. Roland is just proven very adaptable.
It's actually a question I have here that I wanted to pose to you: is how do you feel about Roland's take on no reason to worry about it until it's there? If it is trouble.
I agree. I can't say that it applies to me because I do tend to like, and for me, it isn't necessarily like fixating on what's ahead as much as just like it is overthinking everything. And
interesting that you say that, because the reason I wrote this question down is I feel very much that you're Roland and I'm Eddie. Is that, just take our trip to Vegas. There was times where I'm like, where are we going? Where are we having for dinner? What are we doing? And you're just like, don't worry about it. Very like, hey, it's not time for dinner. Don't worry about it. You're very Roland in that aspect. And I noticed that this a couple of weeks ago when we were in Vegas.
Yeah.
And it actually is like something that I've noticed with you over the years, is that you're like, yeah, if it's a problem, we'll deal with it.
Yeah, and
in that aspect.
Yeah, for sure. But I think with a lot of things, I can overthink a little bit, just because I have no idea why. I think it's because I'm more analytical, so I just tend to like whatever.
I think you keep it to yourself, though, is the thing that you do that's different than me, is that, me, a thought enters my brain and it's out my mouth before I even have a chance to stop it. So
yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I gravitate to Eddie so much. And I was just wondering about this right here. Is this kind of like reminding you of yourself a little bit with Roland? It's like, yeah, he's aware of it, but if he doesn't look at it, he doesn't think about it. Is that kind of something that you do?
Yeah, and something like this, and the way that Roland's saying it, and that's my note, is I kind of agree with Roland here. Because, yeah, there is an element of, like, if there is something you absolutely can't help, then, like, there is no sense in fixating on it. I do agree on that. Like, it doesn't really do any good to just, like, try to live with a future problem when you've got, I don't know. It's kind of like the old, like, sports cliche, too, right? Don't overlook one opponent for the next. Cause
you have an easy game this week. Let's look at the next week where we have a really tough game. No. Don't overlook that guy.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I think I'm kind of a mixture, but yeah, I would align more with Roland here than Eddie, that's for sure, if it comes down to the two.
Real fast before we jump to the next subchapter, which is yours, Baraki says Roland had a much better idea of what Ludd was in advance, though. That's actually true. He kind of knew what they were walking into. He kind of knew what to expect, didn't he?
I mean, within the realm of his world, but I do recall one thing that I actually caught on my rereads, and one of the earlier things, Ludd is referenced, and it is referenced as a mythical city. I believe it's in Gunslinger, which would have been probably a rewrite from King in the 2003 version.
Just adding, sprinkling stuff back in.
But Roland, in an earlier sense, Ludd is talked about in Roland's head, I think it was, and I think it is book 1, and it's called The Mythical City of Ludd. So whereas Roland probably understands like what his world contains and what it's probably going to have in it, I don't know if Roland, I think at some point Roland had to deal with some surprise in his head where it's like, holy shit, Ludd's real.
Yeah.
So
but then also there comes that moment where it's like, oh, it's real. Okay, well, how much of those stories are real?
yeah, exactly.
Are the vampires real? I heard a story about vampires living in there. I also heard a thing about people living underground. Is that real? There's all this different stuff that he heard about Ludd, and he has to be preoccupied with that. Speaking of preoccupied, Chris here in the chat says Roland seems to be preoccupied on something else, which we know to be true.
Yeah.
Ever since he's gotten off Blaine, he's been talking about Susan.
Yeah, and he's had some other random things that he's been saying too.
And they know that there's a story coming.
He almost fainted too.
Yes.
So yeah.
Exactly. And so we know that there's something going on here. We don't know what and everything. So that's what Roland's dealing with, which I kind of understand where he's coming from. He doesn't want to talk about that with what's on his mind.
Yeah.
That's over there. That's, at least a day's walk away, it looks like. I mean, Jake asked if it was, if they were going to get there today and everything. And Roland's just like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
He's definitely preoccupied.
Yeah, indeed. All right. So jumping over to subchapter 12, it's my recap here. Roland was quiet all day as the building drew closer. Susanna realized it was not him being grumpy or worried, but about what was or worried about what was ahead of them, but it was about the story that he promised to tell them. By lunch, the building was clearly seen ahead, a many-turret palace, which appeared to be made entirely of glass. The thinny laid close around it, but it rose above the thinny. It was strange, but Susanna thought it was the most beautiful building she'd ever seen. And as they got closer, she found it hard to look at anything but the building. Watching the clouds reflect on the building was like an illusion, but it was still solid. She had no idea what a building like this was doing in Kansas, but here it was, and she figured time would tell. So, there is kind of what was being alluded to in the chat. Ultimately, Susanna realizes the problem here for Roland is he has promised to tell them the story, and didn't he tell them it's the next night? Like, next time we camp, like, I'll tell you guys. So it's he's got to come to peace with whatever he is, and we don't know why, but it is bothering him for sure. So my notes starting off here again. Roland's attitude is very telling for just how heavy this story is weighing on him. Also, I wanted to point out with Susanna saying it's the most beautiful building she's ever seen. This isn't like some lady from like the 1800s where buildings were all pretty much 1 or 2 story things. This is, someone from mid 20th century America.
1960s.
Like she's seen some pretty
Empire State Building existed in this time for her,
Yeah, there's a number of buildings.
There's a number of classic. I think the Chrysler Building was around then and everything. I don't know about the World Trade Center.
No, 70s.
70s for that one?
Yeah, that was, I think early 70s that got finished. So that was after that, but still, she's not coming, this isn't like her saying it's the most beautiful building and it's coming from a place of, hey, I've never really seen that many incredible buildings. No, she's also
traveled too. It's not like she just stayed in one place.
Yeah,
she's traveled across the country with her protests and stuff like that,
and potentially the world. She's got
we don't
money,
know.
So
we don't know. I just have one note going along with that. With what Eddie said in the last subchapter about it being something out of Disney, and there's not many castles in New York City compared for Susanna to compare it to. So unless she has traveled to Europe and seen castles, which it doesn't hint at or anything like that.
Yeah,
that's probably why she's a little bit blown away. Would Susanna ever really go to Disneyland or Disney World? Disneyland existed for maybe 8 years at this point. It opens in like 1954.
Did it?
Yeah.
And would she have been allowed?
Oh, that's another thing. Yeah, let's be perfectly honest.
Yeah, she's in the early 60s. The Civil Rights Bill won't come for another 4 years from when she was pulled. So,
that's very true. So she may have never even seen Disneyland
and
to know like Eddie's reference. And it also wasn't that big of a commercial thing back then. Eddie's time in the 80s, absolutely. That was the happiest place on earth. Where are you going? You just won the Super Bowl. I'm going to Disney World.
Yeah, and I don't know if Disney was if they segregated or not. I'm just saying that is a question to be asked based on her time period.
Sure.
It's not to say that I know anything about Disney at that era.
No.
I'm just speculating based on the time period she comes from.
Exactly.
Also, this is another cool image I can't wait to see on screen with this palace especially when they're talking about the clouds and looking like some sort of illusion. That this will be a pretty cool thing to see, I think.
Have you ever seen a building like that?
A little bit. I mean,
There's one here in the valley. It's just up this road here, right when you get down by the freeway. When you go past the freeway, there's that great big glass building there. Do you remember which
I
one
think
I'm talking?
so.
You
Yeah.
go that way a lot because your Costco's down that way.
yeah.
So I think you know which building I'm talking about. There's times where like the sunset hits that, or you're driving past it just the right time, and the sun's hitting it. It's pretty impressive to look at, and it's only about, I think it's like 10 or 12 stories tall. Is it?
Yeah.
We're talking about something here that towers into the sky. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that's going to look like. You're
Yeah.
right. That would be an amazing scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed.
And so now we're into subchapter 13.
That's
right?
it for 12. 12 is
Okay.
a short one. Yeah.
Let's jump into 13 then. Let's chug right along.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, chug right along like a choo-choo train. You know?
Friday the 13th.
I was thinking Blaine the Mono.
We just
but okay.
well, I mean 13 as well. It's just
13.
it's
We
a
did
fun-
just have a Friday the
It's a
13th.
fun number.
I'm still bummed that we didn't get to see The Exorcist on that day.
Yeah, indeed.
We had to go the 12th.
Indeed.
Shame. So they make their camp in silence that night. They watch Roland build a fire in silence. They sit in silence. They watch the sunset turn the huge glass edifice ahead of them into a castle of fire. Its towers and battlements glowing first a fierce red, then orange, then gold, which cooled rapidly to ochre as Old Star appeared. No, she thought in Detta's voice. Ain't that one, girl. Not tall. That's the North Star. Same one you seen back home sitting on your daddy's lap. Susanna is surprised to find that she is homesick for Roland's world, then wondered why she was surprised. It was, after all, no one had called her racial slurs, not yet anyway. She found the love of her life and made good friends. The last thought made her feel a bit like crying, and she hugged Jake to her. He let himself be hugged, smiling with his eyes half closed. At some distance, unpleasant but bearable, even without bullet earplugs, the thinny warbled its moaning song. It's very interesting to see Susanna's train of thought here, but it supports what Eddie said to Roland in Wasteland. She wants to be there. She doesn't want to go anywhere else. We've never seen inside Jake or Susanna's mind with that. We've heard Eddie speak it to Roland.
I think Eddie's the biggest question because Jake, with his pursuit of it in the last book,
very clearly he wants to be there.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be in our world anymore. He wants to be with. And I know technically we're not in Roland's world right now, but ultimately, yeah, she does. I think Eddie would be the only question. And he's said that he would like continue on with the tower even if Roland died. So I don't necessarily doubt his like dedication to the journey. But I don't know where Eddie's heart is in terms of Midworld versus our world, whereas the other two, I think, are fully sold in. And I think this is a really great chunk right here that we just covered because it does show why, right? Like she's not Susanna's definitely not coming from a world that was relatively nice to her, and she hadn't really, I don't know, and I mean she ultimately found herself. Odetta and Detta were merged together in this world. She found and married Eddie in this world, and again, it's not a world full of prejudice and racism that she's seen so far. And I will say she is obviously, and we have obviously seen a very limited chunk of this world so far. So time will tell on that, because I remember thinking that when I was reading it, and so I was like, oh yeah, that's true. But then I thought about it, I'm like, well, how many people have they actually come across?
The few in Lud and River Crossing.
Yeah, I mean, outside of that, it's been generally wilderness. So it's like, I don't know, like, and I don't know, like, I remember reading the first time and being like, I don't know if we're ever going to get to a spot where you, like, get to some civilized area. And, like, I don't know at that point, is there going to be, like, a prejudice against her for either her race or her disability? I have no idea. I just remember thinking that in my head when I was reading the first time, because I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a good point. Like, but then again, you've mostly been dealing with giant robotic bears.
But how much of a sample size do we actually have?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like you're traveling the United States in the 20th century or 21st century and driving through 50 cities, like, and you have like a huge swath of, or even just different countries throughout our world and different cities. You don't have that because so much of it's in the wilderness. You just don't know.
Baraki says Eddie loves Roland's world. At least he does by now, but he misses certain things from ours. Think of the conversation he has with...
Yeah, that we can't talk about the rest of that statement.
Okay.
But yes.
Sorry,
No,
I should have read ahead.
And ultimately, I do agree. I'm not even necessarily saying that Eddie is not into this world. I'm just saying that he is the one that we have the least dedicated like statement. Like the other two, like again, Jake's pursuit of like I need to get out of this world. I mean,
You're saying the actions of the other two versus what Eddie said to Roland.
And now with this getting in Susanna's mind and actually seeing where she's like, I miss that world. I don't want to be here.
So you're saying that we can't trust what Eddie said to Roland before Lud?
No, I'm just saying that we haven't gotten to his mind enough to know like what again, we know he's dedicated to the journey. He says he'll go to the tower without Roland. What I'm saying is that let's say after the tower, I don't know that Susanna or Jake would necessarily want to leave this world because it seems like they're kind of enjoying it. Whereas Eddie, like if there were to be another door after the Dark Tower, I think Eddie would be the only one that I would be interested in seeing like what would his thoughts be about maybe going through a door now that the journey is complete and potentially going back to America. He's the only one that I would question. And it's not a question in a bad way where it's like I don't trust him. It's more of just like the other two seem pretty damn solid of like I'm done with that world. This world's better. And Eddie is the only one that I'm not sure and again, not that he has a lot to go back to, right? He doesn't have his brother or anything. But we just haven't gotten his head to that same extent.
Let me throw a wrench into your hypothesis here. It says that Susanna is homesick for Roland's world, but this isn't her world that we're comparing it to. We're comparing it to a dead world from The Stand.
Yeah, but
so at the end of the day, when she says she's homesick for Roland's world, it's compared to this world, not her own.
I would disagree. I think looking at the North Star and realizing that she wants to see Old Star and Old Mother instead of the North Star, I think that turns into our world versus Roland's world, not necessarily the fact that this is a plague-infested world. Because they're looking at constellation, for her, I mean, we don't know about the others, but for her, she's looking at the constellations going, God, I want Old Mother. I don't want the North Star.
Yeah.
And to me, that would apply to both this existence and her own. I just don't think she cares.
I think that's too much of a generalization to say that, oh yeah, she's absolutely sick of her world entirely. She would never want to go back to it and everything like that, based off of the fact that she says, man, I wish I was back in Roland's world right now. What if it's the thinny? What if it's the fact that everyone's dead in this world as far as she knows? It's also a little bit off from her world, so it might be disconcerting. It doesn't exactly spell it out that she's completely done with her world.
Yeah, but that's the way I read this again, because it's not the world she's looking at. It's not the dead bodies and all the cars. She's looking at the stars and going, God, I want Old Mother. I don't want the North Star.
That's not her speaking. That's Detta.
Yeah, well, I mean, Detta's the one that's saying that's not the one. But then, I mean, I guess if you want to try to say that it's Detta saying that she doesn't want, or she wants Roland's, or is homesick for Roland's world. But I don't know. I think and again, there's a lot going on to that. We understand it just said that there's no racism that she's seen, and also that she found Eddie. So there's also the Eddie part of the equation.
I think that's the thing that I would question on Susanna's. I don't want to say loyalty. Loyalty is not the right word.
Yeah,
because she's loyal to Roland.
Yeah.
This isn't a question of her not going with Roland.
Yeah.
It's a question of what would happen if there was no Roland. Like, they wake up the next morning and Roland's gone. And there's a doorway there. Do they continue or do they go through the doorway? I think it all determines, for her, what Eddie decides. And I see that's where I don't think that I'm debating on whether or not to agree with you that she's more committed than Eddie, when her entire thing fringes on what Eddie decides.
Yeah, I just think that if it were the two of them discussing, the way I'm viewing it here, I think that if there's anyone that might have some thought of like, hey, this is over, let's go through this door, I think Eddie might be the one, because he's the only one so far that we have seen doesn't have like a complete like forsaking of our world. And again, I'm with you. We're not talking about loyalties or any kind of like, one's better than the other. It's more of just like where their heads at, because like, I don't know, it's a different world. It's a whole different reality. And all of us would react differently, but it's true. I think that for me, it just come down to if there was a discussion between the deans, I think the one would be arguing for sure for this world, I think might be Susanna, just saying like, hey, there's nothing wrong with this world, like as long as you're here. But I agree with you though. I do think a large part of it, and it mentions it here, Eddie's one of the first things that it mentions if she found her husband. So I do think he's a huge weight on the scale for sure.
Yeah, and I think that Eddie's more dedicated than she is.
To the journey, I agree with you. It's the world part where I'm just like, if there was, again, after the journey, that's why I would have to say after the journey, is after the journey, if there was a time to potentially go through a door, Eddie would be the one that I'd be curious about. And I wouldn't even judge him for it.
He's like, hey, we did it.
We're done. I'm going back through. Like,
let's go home.
I want a bucket of chicken from KFC. Like, and I wouldn't blame him because I might be in the same damn boat as him.
I think it all depends on what's on the other side of that journey is the question. Because, see, the thing with Eddie is that he expects to die on this journey. He says that to Roland. He's like, if you die, we're going to continue going, and I'm going to go until I die. That's what he says to Roland back before Lud and everything
for
like
sure.
that. So,
and that's why I have to cage
that's where I'm like,
that's why I have to cage this inside of the element of after the tower, because I think Eddie is pretty much tower obsessed now. So I'm only talking, and I'm not talking like forsaking the journey. I'm just saying journey's over. There's a door to go through. Let's say Roland just gets sucked up like hey, Roland must go help his people and get sucked up into a UFO.
What's the word? The rapture happens, and then there goes Roland.
Roland's gone. Maybe Jake too, because Jake's pretty tied to Roland. I think Jake's biggest tie is to Roland now. But I do think if they were the deans discussing it, and
there's this entity that's like, you can go with them, or you can go through this door back to New York in 1980, and you will be married and have a life together.
Yeah, and I think if there were a disagreement between the two, I would assume Susan would want to stay in this world. Eddie might want to go back to the other world.
She would want to stay with Roland and Jake. She would want to keep the Ka-Tet together.
Yeah, but then if Eddie still,
I think that if Jake is with Roland, Eddie stays. If Jake goes with them and has to make the choice, then I think Eddie has to make that choice for what's best for the kid, kind of thing.
And of course, it's all just a tangent.
Should he grow? Yeah, of course. This is what we do. I mean, this is dark tangent palaver,
indeed.
But I think there the sway vote would be where does Eddie and Jake sit? Because like you just automatically lump Jake in with Roland, but what if Jake has that choice too? Jake might make that choice, and that's where I think you're right. I think Eddie would try to influence that because does the kid deserve that? He's already died in this world. Like, does he deserve to be here, especially with that man? Yeah. What has that man done? Do we trust that man? Eddie always has those hesitations with him. Constantly, he's badgering him about everything. It seems like questioning him every step of the way.
Yeah.
So that's where I think you're right. Is that? But if you say, "Oh, Roland and Jake they're gone," of course Eddie's going to choose to go back home because where else would he go?
Yeah, and also I think because whereas Jake, the reason I don't question him at all because he actively went back to Roland's world.
Right.
The other two were pulled, and I think Susanna has found a much greater peace in this world. Whereas Eddie, I think there's at least a sliver of question where he still might find some comfort in our world. If the whole journey is set aside, or not set aside, but if it's done,
you could see Eddie. You could see Eddie going back to a life in New York and becoming a bartender or something, and marrying Suze and having kids and moving on with his life.
Yes,
but you see Susan getting restless,
and she would maybe want, unless she can go to the 80s something and maybe be in a different time.
No,
period.
she would be with Eddie if she couldn't.
Certainly,
if she couldn't go with Eddie, Eddie would not leave.
No, I know, but if they were both going back to the 50s or 60s, she might be a lot more like, let's not go there. Whereas Eddie would, if it was, we can move on though, because this is quite a tangent.
This is quite a one.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's just funny to me. It's just how I view the characters of like where their heads are at. And again, not in terms of loyalty to the Roland, to the journey. It's more of just like where their heads at outside of the journey, or if the journey's complete.
I think that's where I was misunderstanding at first while I was being a little bit argumentative, is because I thought you were saying that Eddie would be the one that would cry off, and I'm like,
oh no,
dude, no, we know better.
No, tower obsession outside of Roland.
Post-tower decision.
Yeah,
post-tower
because
decision.
we've already kind of got the sense of Eddie as maybe not as obsessed as Roland. That'd be putting it too far.
I think it's starting to even out.
Next to Roland, Eddie is the biggest tower obsession. I don't think Jake cares as much. I think his dedication is to Roland,
which is why he doesn't ask that many questions. And then Susanna is here for Eddie.
Well, now he has Oi too. That's
true.
That's going to probably be a swaying thing in his mind. So, but yes, let's go
ahead.
All
right, let's continue.
All right, let's see. Did I read my note too? Yeah. Okay.
That's where the tangent.
Oh no, I didn't read my note.
Oh, it's not.
So it makes total sense for her to appreciate other worlds more. Yes, she had wealth and luxury, but it seems like she had very little companionship or any really close relationships.
Things
it felt
that
like
you can't buy with money, right? That's what they always say.
It's like we kind of hear about these people that she's at these marches with and stuff, but it's like, did we really get any sense of any real friends? Like it was her driver and her doorman that were the most concerned of her disappearances and stuff. So
that's very. telling that there's not a close friend. I mean, if Tad disappears for 3 weeks, I'm going to notice.
Yeah, exactly, and the
You
fact
know,
that
and there would be other people too that would notice.
yeah.
Same thing with me, obviously. My wife and my friends,
Yeah.
you would notice and everything. But for Susanna, it's her driver and the doorman.
The doorman,
That's it.
two people who it's a professional thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's their job to know her.
it's kind of like Miss what's her name, Greta Shaw for Jake, right?
Yeah.
The one that cares for him the most is the one that's on the payroll.
Yeah.
Which is a sad statement.
That
but
would, it's actually kind of true for Susanna too.
yeah, it's the payroll people care
Yeah.
more about her than anyone. And so I guess for me, like, yes, she may have like a life of luxury because she's rich, but it's like still, and then you also still have racism to throw in there. Like, there's not a lot for her to love about the world. It's a pretty lone, and I mean, for someone that's now found a spouse, that's a stark difference.
Yes.
Just an isolated, and then she didn't know she was split necessarily, but now she understands. Like,
Right.
I was living two conflicting lives. I had no one really close to me, and now I've got a husband. Like, it's kind of a cool thing to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, when the traces of yellow start to fade from the castle, Roland left them to sit in the turnpike travel lane and return to his fire to cook. They ate in silence, and Roland didn't eat much. By the time they finished, they could see the Milky Way scattered across the walls of the castle. That sounds amazing. Eddie was the one to break the silence and said that Roland didn't have to tell them. He was excused, absolved, or whatever he needed to take that look off of his face. Roland ignores him and drinks from the water jug like a hillbilly drinking out of a moonshine jug, which I just love that image.
As I'll say, is that just we all know exactly what that looks like, right?
Yep.
Like, there's no like question there. I love that.
Just the little XXX on the bottle. The last mouthful he spits to the roadside. Life for your crop, Eddie says. He doesn't smile. Roland said nothing, but his cheek went pale as if it had been if it had seen a ghost or heard one. The anticipation and tension here is just so powerful. Oh, by the way, that's the end of the subchapter. That's the whole subchapter, was that.
Yeah.
Just them walking a little bit and then that conversation at the end. But the anticipation and tension here is just so palpable. I'm on the edge of my seat, and I've read this several times. I know what happens.
Yeah.
And still I'm just like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, I guess I didn't put a note for it for a previous part of this, but also when they're talking about the whole group is pretty silent as they're setting up camp and stuff. That's pretty unusual. So it's not just him. I think there's kind of a dark cloud over the whole group.
You're talking about an 11-year-old boy with a talking companion.
Yeah.
A chatterbox ADHD former heroin addict, and his wife, let's be perfectly honest,
Yeah.
a husband and wife not talking to each other,
Yeah.
and a newlywed couple,
Yeah.
so chatty for them. I mean, me and my wife have been married for 12 years this February, and we're still chatty.
Yeah.
For them to be completely silent until Eddie breaks the silence, that's
Yeah. And of course,
that is unusual.
Of course, it's Eddie that tries to like
Of course
excuse it all, right?
He's like, dude, whatever we got to do to get that look off of your face.
Yeah. And I could we don't see it, but I can just see Susanna not reacting well to that because she's been the one that's pressing the hardest for this story. So yeah.
And then my last note here, man, what is Roland going to tell them?
Yeah, indeed. My note, King has done a good job this whole section just to show Roland's mood, to tell us that this is no happily ever after kind of story. Not that I feel there's a lot of those kind of stories in his world. I wonder if they even have the term happily ever after in his world.
And then they lived for a couple days. The end. That's Roland's thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I couldn't imagine if we got a book of tales from Gilead and Roland's world.
Children's stories. Like
Yeah.
the grim fairy tales are from Roland's world.
It'd probably be more along those lines.
Yeah.
It would be kind of
And
our...
then the little boy and little girl were baked into pies and the witch ate them. The end.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, man. So then subchapter 14, moving on here, Roland turned to Jake and said that when he went to his trial of manhood at the age of 14, the youngest of his class and maybe the youngest ever, he asked Jake if he remembered him telling him that story. Susanna thought that they had all heard that story but kept her mouth shut. Jake asked if it was when they were chasing Walter and after the way station but before the fall. Roland agrees, and Jake said he remembered a bit, the way he remembered dreams. Roland said to listen then, and he would tell more because Jake is older. Susanna was just as fascinated by the story this time. Then it goes through and kind of recaps the story of Martin and Roland's mom. Roland defeating Court telling him to wait. After being defeated, he tells him to wait, don't pursue Martin right away. Susanna asks if he listened, and he said that he never had a chance. Roland said that he buried his hawk and then went to a brothel and slept with a woman for the first time. He was poking the fire with a stick and realized the symbolism that was going on and threw the stick away with a lopsided grin. I do love that. Very Freudian of Roland here.
Yeah.
Roland said that the sex was good, but not as good as he and his friends thought or speculated it would be. Susanna said that store-bought pussy is always overrated by the young. Roland continued to tell the story, and Susanna felt she could actually see what he was telling them. She could smell the rain, see the kid laying with the woman. Then the door crashed open.
That's the whole subchapter, right?
Yeah, that's the whole subchapter. I do think it goes a little bit into some of the stuff, but we've already actually seen most of the story. We've already covered it. So again, a good recap to put a bit more meat on the bones, as the argument section may not have given enough detail. But this is for a first-time reader or someone who may not have read the previous books in years. I guess from my view, I kind of view this as kind of a cool way for King to restate it with more than you can in the argument section, because I think we that sit here and read these straight through have to kind of forget that there were people that had years between these.
Yeah. And
King, I don't know, I don't think he could assume that every audience member was going to pick up every previous book, read them all right before the new one came out, and refresh themselves. Not to mention someone that may pick the book up for the first time and go, oh, what's this? And then buy it, never having read anything previous. So
that's why I think that's one of the reasons why King is always so upfront in the argument section. Hey, hopefully I've caught you before you left the bookstore, kind of thing. He does that on several of these, doesn't he?
No, that you're thinking of The Stand.
Is it The Stand?
The Stand, where he talks about, hold on, hopefully I've gotten you before you hit the cash register.
Yeah.
This isn't a new book, and then he kind of explains the whole thing or whatever.
Yeah.
With these, no, he just says that this is a larger story. This is book 4 of a larger series.
That's what he says.
And then he goes through and starts to kind of highlight what happened in the previous stories.
Yeah.
So, what do you got?
I love that Susanna is still just as fascinated the second time hearing the story. This resounds with me because my dad has a couple stories that no matter how many times I hear them, I love hearing him tell them.
Yeah.
Also, it's one of those things that, if you ever heard someone tell a story, I know your grandpa was great with stories.
Yeah.
I met him several times over the years and worked with him. He was a leather worker, and he would tell us stories. I heard you tell a story, and then I heard him retell the story a year or so later, and there was more details.
Yeah.
And you ever have that with your grandpa where he told you the story once, and then a couple years later he tells it again?
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah, by the way, I remember this part of that. And you're like, you didn't tell me that the first time.
Yeah.
I picture that here with Susanna, is that she's obsessed with that. I mean, we also know that she used to love listening to her dad talk. Mm-hmm. She'd go sit on his lap and everything like that, and we'd have that.
Yeah, she has more of the familial, versus the boys don't necessarily, right? Jake doesn't have a relationship with his parents.
Nope.
And Susanna, Eddie, he
doesn't even know his dad.
No, he's a latchkey kid. He's got a mom that's probably working way too much to put, or not too much, but working a lot to where she's probably not spending a lot of time telling stories as much as she is putting food on the table.
That's why Henry's looking out for him.
Yeah, Henry, and for him it's more of what is the Saturday afternoon serials showing him more than storytelling.
Exactly. And that's probably Eddie's fascination with hearing stories the second time is probably him watching a movie a second or third time.
Yeah.
Which he did. You're talking about on TV and stuff like that. So
yeah.
It's fun when something like that resonates with you so well, because it's the same with my dad. He has these couple stories that he tells and I'm just like, oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, and then my last note for this subchapter, I love the Roland with the stick in the fire. Makes me laugh every time, just because it's you almost don't imagine Roland to have that. I don't know. I don't want to say infantile, but I don't know. What's sophomoric? Wit?
Immature.
Yes.
Immature. He said boobies.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Most of, at least us men,
we're all children.
We never outgrow that. But for Roland, it's one of the first times we've seen it from him. So
yeah, I expect that from Eddie, not from Roland.
Yeah. I mean, Eddie would probably have a lot more than just a smile, though.
Yeah,
he'd probably have some remarks and jokes,
three or four jokes to go with it.
Exactly.
Riddles to go with it.
No, he hates riddles.
Those are riddles.
He would call them jokes.
He won a riddle contest in this book. Let's not forget that.
Hey, he's not gonna, and Roland isn't gonna give him shit for just calling him jokes anyway. He doesn't have to lie and call them riddles.
So we're going over to subchapter 15. That was your last note, right?
Yep.
Okay. A man enters the room. He is very tall and slim. He is dressed in faded jeans and a dusty shirt of blue chambray. Go ahead and do your first note.
I mean, blue chambray shirt.
There it is.
We should get a button for that to have a sound thing.
Chambray shirt.
One of the most common Stephen King
All the
tropes,
time.
if not the most common Stephen King tropes. So
I don't know. Evil religious woman seems to be up there with it.
no, there's evil religious people, but to outweigh blue chambray shirts, I mean, there's
probably not.
There's books that have 4 or 5 of them in one book. I mean, so, gotta love that though. Any Stephen King fan does the Leo DiCaprio meme, with this.
Hey, chambray shirt. On his head is a dark gray hat with a snakeskin band, and laying low on his hips are 2 old leather holsters, and inside them were pistols with sandalwood grips. And these are the pistols the boy would someday bear to lands of which the scowling man with the furious blue eyes would never dream. Roland was in motion. Before he could even open his eyes, he rolls to his left, groping under the bed for what was there. He was fast, so fast it was scary, but the man in the faded jeans was even faster. Susanna saw this clearly too. The man grabbed Roland and yanked him out off the bed and onto the floor. Roland still tried to reach for what was under the bed, and the man stamped on his fingers. "Bastard," cries Roland, and then his eyes opened. He saw the invading man was his father. I remember being excited that this is where the story started the first time I read through this. We saw his trial way back in book 1, but we didn't see much of his dad.
No.
Doesn't he talk to him like once about Hacks the Cook? But that's all we get of him, and that's all we've gotten of his father so far.
Yeah, we got. I think we got somewhat of an image of him too, because like he was talking about.
Well, he mentions like the riddle and like the dancing and stuff like that. Like we have.
Well, he has the conversation with his dad about hacks because he said something along the lines of like, "Oh, I did it for for king and country." He's like, "Well, if he did it for something that's stupid, then he just shits on him for like." Whatever. So we have at least an idea of his dad, but we're certainly getting way more. I mean, well, this is the first time we've seen him in a long time, and this.
Yes, exactly.
This, I mean, I'm happy for it.
I'm always pumped for it.
Every time I'm dreamcasting Stephen Deshane, this is the scene I think of.
It's this one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know which one I think of?
What's that?
Actually, never mind. It's coming up, so
okay.
Don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah.
No spoilers, right? No spoilers. And so then you got your note here, and then I got one more.
So outside my blue chambray shirt, I said the speed of these characters will be interesting to see on screen. I wonder if you could even really portray the speed as fast as King has us imagining it.
Remind me, you don't like it when they slow stuff down, do you?
It
shows someone moving in like regular motion, kind of like X-Men with Quicksilver.
No, I mean that's.
But it makes sense for him. Do you think it makes sense for Roland and Steven?
No,
here?
I even thought about that.
You would think that would look tacky, right?
Yeah, I even thought about that. Where I'm like, when I wrote this note, it's like, I thought like, oh, cool. How have they done speedsters from comic book movies and stuff?
Exactly.
It's like you can't really do that because that's like they're not that much faster than normal. They're just a little bit faster. So I don't know if you just like record, the scene, but then play it at like 1 1/4 speed, so it just looks that much faster. I don't know.
You know what you do. Is when Roland scrambles, he knocks a vase off of the end table. And then by the time the vase hits the ground, we already have the exchange here, thrown across the, stamped on the and then the vase crashes. That's how you display speed.
Yeah.
But you do it in real time.
Yeah.
You just have the vase, it falls, but you never actually see it hit.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Mark in the chat says Bruce Greenwood is his pick for Stephen Deshane, which... right on the heels of House of Usher. That is not a bad pick. I've always thought of Kurt Russell as one of my favorite picks. I don't know if he's who I've picked the last couple
Tomahawk
times.
is the one where I never really liked your pick for Kurt Russell for Stephen Deshane. You've had that pick for over a decade.
Oh, yeah, because for me, originally I came up with that just based off Tombstone.
Yeah, and in my head, he's too young.
In my head, I aged it up. But then we got Bone Tomahawk, and then there was the Hateful Eight with Tarantino.
Yeah.
Both of those, he played Westerns as an older guy, and both of them, it was like...
Yeah, it wasn't until... haven't watched Hateful Eight.
Oh, dude.
But when I watched Bone Tomahawk, I'm like, oh, That's what Tad was seeing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Bruce Greenwood, that's not a bad pick.
Not a bad pick.
And with
Not a bad pick.
With the Flanagan Dark Tower series, most likely Bruce is showing up somewhere.
He's got to. That's one thing we need to talk about is Flanagan's regulars and where we'd cast them.
I fully intend on the next episode
On the palaver?
to have a conversation. Not necessarily where you have to recast everything again, because we just did that not too long ago when they
I think we should just do the Flanagan regulars, because there's more than just a couple regulars now.
Yeah.
I want anyone who's appeared in at least 2 Flanagan works to appear on that list.
I think even our last Dreamcasting, I think we went a little bit heavier with Flanagan, because that was after the Flanagan announcement. Was it December of 22?
I would admit that there's some on that list that didn't make it for me.
But
in my Dreamcasting.
So I don't want to do a full one again, because
I want
to do it. But I want to have a conversation about, now in light of House of Usher, what are some things. And I'll just throw a tease out there right now.
Go on.
After House of Usher, I've got a different pick for Mark Hamill. So that'll be my tease.
Interesting.
That'll be my tease.
Interesting. I'm intrigued.
Yes. So,
but we're saving that not for Geekery Abides. We're saving that for Dark Tower Palaver Roundtable in
a
2
fortnight
weeks.
from now. Yes.
Fortnight from now.
Indeed.
So that was your note, right?
Yep.
Okay. The way King reminds us of things with his description: sandalwood grips, faster than his father. He'll go farther than his father will ever take them. Sorry, my brain broke there with 2 words that are basically the same. I've never had another author do anything like this with us. The detail that he's showing us here, and literally this is like a paragraph in the book.
You know what I picture too is, like, on screen is you see the guns, but you don't get the full shot of the person until after, because like I think by this point we will fully know what Roland's guns look like. We will have seen them countless times with Roland, with Eddie, with Susanna,
because we're not starting here.
Exactly. So when that shows up on screen and this person kicks the door in, and you just get like a shot of just their like lower torso,
Leo DiCaprio moment,
and you
pointing,
and
like,
you see and you see those guns, like that'll be a moment for sure.
All right, so going on, the whore raises a protest, but the man ignores her and reaches under the bed and drags out 2 gun belts. The pistols in them are not as large as his own, but still pretty big. They do not have wood in the grips, but eroded metal plates. And then a direct quote here from the book. I love this part. I don't know why, but I think this is just a great way for King to write just such a small character for us. When the whore saw the guns on the man's hips and the one is in his hands, she decided that was her cue to leave. The expression of sleepy petulance left her face, and what replaced it was the fox-like look of a born survivor. She was up, out of bed, across the room, and out the door before her bare bum had more than a brief moment to twinkle in the morning sun. And I put here my note. Not only do I love the image of her expression change to the survivor, but this also shows us how serious the situation is for Roland. He is in serious trouble. Also, just another note that just popped into my head. How serious a whore, a prostitute, takes the gunslinger profession.
Well, also,
this is gunslinger business. I need to get the hell out of here.
We've established enough already. This world does not have a lot of guns.
No.
So for her to be in a room with 2 people fully armed,
4 guns.
That's
nope. Time to go.
Yeah, that's going to be very unique for this world.
You hit that eject button, you get the fuck out of there. That's the reason why I don't know why, but that always resonates with me. Is that look of sleepiness leaves her face and a fox-like look of a survivor. Oof. That's such a great description there from King.
Yeah.
So going on, neither of them looked towards her as she made her exit. The man in the jeans held out the gun belts to Roland. He had taken these guns from the fuzzer beneath the barracks of the apprentice barracks the previous afternoon, using Court's key. The man shook the guns like you might shake something at a puppy that's chewed on it, like shaking it like beneath its nose. He shook it so hard one of the pistols fell out, and despite his stupefaction, Roland caught it. Roland says that he thought that the man was in the west after Farson, and he gets cut off by a slap. The slap was so hard it sends Roland tumbling across the room into a corner with blood pouring from the corner of his mouth. That's a hard slap.
So another thing, once he slaps him here, another reason that Kurt Russell comes to mind. If there's a Western with a man slapping another man, that's more iconic than
You'll
Tombstone. So if I didn't have Kurt Russell immediately in mind, I guarantee the first time I read that, when this slap happens, I'm like,
yep, there it is.
It's Kurt Russell.
Yep, there it is. Roland's first instinct is to raise the gun he still held. Stephen Deshane looked at him with hands on hips, reading his thoughts before they had finished forming. His lips pulled back in a singular, mirthless grin that showed all his teeth and most of his gums. Quote from the book here: "Shoot me if you will. Why not? Make this abortion complete. Ah, gods, I'd welcome it." And I just might pausing here for some notes. Oh boy, I remember being shocked because we had such little with Stephen before this, like we talked about, and now this is how you make an entrance. I wonder if the show will keep this as the first big scene for him. I could honestly see Flanagan taking that scene with Hax the Cook away from Stephen and giving it to someone else. That way, this is your intro to Stephen. Imagine if this was the first time you see Stephen Deshane, the father, the one that he's talked about for seasons.
I think that would be
you know?
hard with the hack stuff. And also, I think that I don't know. Do you want to be introduced to him in this, or would you already want him somewhat established with like the hack scene, and then get here where it's like now you
There
see
you
him?
go. See, that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I knew you'd have another way of looking at it.
So here's another thing I'm just going to throw out there. There's been some discussion, I think on one of the Dark Tower subreddits about how Flanagan's 5 seasons and 2 movies is going to shake out. How do you wreak a moment when thinking about that? What if the movies are all the flashback stuff?
Oof.
Because that way you take the entire element. 'Cause I mean, ultimately, if you do stick a season with this, like, or you know, with a bunch of the flashback stuff, even if it's in the middle, like, because Flanagan said he wants it to kind of line out like the books. If you do that, you're talking like the Jake actor now has a year where he's going to be
Just growing older.
largely off screen, growing older, and so it makes me wonder if the 2 movies are going to cover everything in Roland's past. Just so now you almost make the movies in parallel with the show, and you could do, I don't know. That's the thought I had.
It's interesting.
It'll be interesting to see when we get some announcements on that. But I love him basically scolding him like a dog with the gun belts. It totally recontextualized Roland for us. We've never really seen him laid this low before. I mean, we've seen him in some desperate situations. We've seen him poisoned. We've seen him do some heinous things, both to strangers and to a boy he was taking care of. But being put to shame like this, like being basically treated like a scalded dog, like, wow, even for a young 14-year-old Roland, this is like, whoa, this makes you stop and like take notice a little bit.
Yeah. Hang on to that note for a second, because I want to talk about your note again in just a second after something else happens. But I love Roland's first instinct here when someone attacks him, no matter who does the attacking, is to point a gun at them. It's in his hand. His natural instinct is that if I have a weapon, if I have a gun, I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
That's his first instinct. But
yeah.
But we see Roland able to establish control over himself.
Yeah.
Because going on, Roland lays the gun on the floor, pushes it away with the back of his hand. I like that little detail, like the back of his hand. Clearly not wanting to.
Yeah.
Because all at once he didn't want his fingers anywhere near the trigger. They were no longer in his control. He had discovered that yesterday around the time he broke Court's nose. Roland tells his father that he was tested and that he is a man. He took Court's stick and he won. His father calls him a fool. The grin is gone, and he looks old and haggard. He sits down heavily on the bed, looks at the gun belts he was still holding, and drops them on the floor between his feet. He says that Roland is a 14-year-old fool, and the worst, most desperate kind. He looked up at Roland, and the anger was back. Roland didn't mind. He thought the anger was better than the wariness, the look of being old. Stephen says that he knew since Roland was very small that he was no genius, but he never believed that the boy would to be an idiot. To let himself be driven like a cow in a chute. He tells Roland he has forgotten the face of his father and to say it. And I just put my note here. Ouch, that's such a harsh statement from father to son. In all of the media out there, we have Yellowstone where father talks down to sons in that. We have other
plenty.
There's
yeah.
You pick one. Damn,
Yeah.
that one's got a sting.
Yeah. I have to imagine Roland thought he might get some pride from his dad for winning his guns, but this is not going the way I think he expected it to. Because that's the thing. Ultimately, we can't forget is up until that moment that we just covered, Stephen may not know. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why he went looking for Roland down here. But at least in Roland's mind, there is a chance that maybe he came back from Crescia and somehow heard that Roland was in the whorehouse or whatever. A 14-year-old kid to a whorehouse too. but like until that moment, Roland doesn't know for sure if his dad knows his new position. You know,
He went for the guns though, like instantly. I think that's where it's kind of like, oh, he knew.
yeah. I mean, as a reader, I don't know fully if Steven knew or not. Most likely he did because that's why he's so mad. But ultimately, Roland probably doesn't know that. Roland, once he registers,
Yeah,
his
he's also
dad,
just barely woken up,
and now he's being like, tongue lashed like a fucking dog, then trying to basically like put himself up and be like, hey, I won my guns, like, because it's kind of an element of like a kid trying to like, put themselves, up to a higher pedestal,
Yeah.
right? It's like, well, I got my driver's license. Kids always try to do that. There's an element of like they want to be adults, so every little
Well, I stood up to my teacher who was wrong, and it's like, yeah, you don't realize what you did, right?
yeah,
Like you put your scholarship in jeopardy by standing up to that kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. So I think that like at least in Roland's mind now he understands that like his dad knows, and he hasn't really changed much of his disposition. So
Yeah, exactly. And so just a reminder, Roland said that he'd forgotten the face of his father. Steven says Roland has forgotten the face of his father, and to say it. Roland shouts that isn't true, still naked on the floor of the horse crib. Steven says it is true, and to say his atonement or he will strip the hide from... And then Roland interrupts and says, and this is a quote from the book, "They were together," he burst out. "Your wife and your minister, your magician. I saw the mark of his mouth on her neck, on my mother's neck." He reached for the gun and picked it up, but even in his shame and fury, was still careful not to let his fingers stray near the trigger. He held the apprentice's revolver only by the plain, undecorated metal on its barrel. "Today, I end his treacherous seducer's life with this. And if you aren't man enough to help me, at least you can stand aside and let me..." And that's where the quote ends. Steven draws one of his guns, and he's so fast that Roland never even saw him move. There's a single shot, and the gun Roland had been holding was blown not only out of his hand, but out of the window and gone forever. The shot was so loud that Roland couldn't hear for a full minute.
you can always go with like the ringing
Yep.
when you do this show. Just have that ringing where you can't hear anything for a second.
Exactly.
Or do you do the ringer, or do you like the Band of Brothers where it's just silent?
Yeah.
So remember the Band of Brothers, it always throws you off because you're always like, wait, did the audio go out? The first time you watch
Shit,
it,
is
you're
there
like, did
well, because we always used to have DVD players, so we're like, oh shit, did something go wrong with my cables?
yeah.
Is there something wrong with my DVD player? Is there something wrong with the disc? Did I get a faulty one? And it's like, oh no, it's meant to be.
Then
that.
as the sound starts to slowly come in, you realize, like, oh no, it's for effect.
Oh, okay.
It's usually the ringing they put in there where it lets you know, like, oh, there's no problem. But when it goes dead silent, you're always like,
Oh,
wait,
no.
did something happen?
My note here is just how fast do you have to be there where even Roland can't track it or see it or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't even register it.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's not to his full form yet, but you would expect even as a apprentice, he would have at least gotten to the realm of like trying to be able to like see the speed. So I love that nothing that Roland is saying is changing things. I think that part of you hopes for Roland that he goes his ways, and his dad locks arm in arm like the Wizard of Oz people, and they go to fight Martin. But this is just so much more interesting. I mean, again, like you kind of like for his sake want it to go his way, but at the same time, this is so much more interesting. Like this just storytelling wise, this is the right thing to do.
It's also so funny to read it. I never thought about this until just now with your note there. I never thought about Roland and his dad teaming up and everything like that. That's what I obviously wanted when I was younger. But nowadays, as an adult, I'm like, dude, you stupid fucking kid.
Yeah.
Like, there's obviously something more going on here, you fucking idiot.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
like, come on.
Yeah, when you were 17, 18, read this for the
first time reading this 17, 18, I'm like, yeah, Roland, get that fucker. Fuck you, Steven.
Go kill the wizard.
Yeah, kill the damn wizard. And my mom's like, what is he talking about?
Oh, Harry Potter, don't worry.
Yeah, just Harry Potter, Mom. Which I was reading around the same time as well, so. Roland looks at Steven shocked and amazed. Steven looks back and doesn't say anything for a long time. But now he wore the face Roland remembers from earliest childhood. Calm and sure. The weariness and the fury had passed like last night's thunderstorms. Steven says he was wrong, and he apologizes. Roland has not forgotten his face, but he was foolish and was driven by one far slyer than he will ever be in his whole life. It is only by the grace of God and Ka that Roland wasn't sent west. That would have meant one more true gunslinger was out of Martin and John Farson's road and out of the road which leads to the creature that rules them. He stands and holds out his arms and says, quote, "If I had lost you, Roland, I should have died." Roland gets to his feet, still naked, and embraces his father. When Stephen kissed him first on one cheek and then the other, Roland begins to weep. And then at the very end of the subchapter, the last part of it is that in Roland's ear, he whispers 6 words.
That's the end of the subchapter.
That's
Good
where
thing
the
we're not
subchapter
stopping
ends.
right there.
That's all for today, folks. Come back next week in a fortnight. And,
Oh man,
this is such a powerful scene for Stephen. Instant respect for him to put his way of handling Roland for me, simply because there's the anger, and I, as a father, I've had this. There's the anger of, damn it, kid, you scared me.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, God, what the hell are you doing? You know, kind of thing. But then you have to tone it back, and you have to, kid, I was so scared. You have to understand that was fear, not really anger. That is a true parent range of emotion right here from Stephen. It hits so close to home for me.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Honestly, from Steven's perspective, and how close he almost came to losing his son, I could definitely see his anger and fear. It makes total sense. Like, it completely recontextualizes his entire scene, right? Like, at first, it's just like, oh, he catches his kid in a whorehouse, like, and then as the scene progresses, you understand, like, what he's mad about. And then at the end, it's like, you know, because, again, we understood that from the first book when he goes to his trial, is because Court tries to talk him out of it multiple times. Tries to talk him out of it because he says, if you fail, you're sent west.
He even tells him, this is your last chance. Cry off. And then they pick their weapons.
And he gives him another chance.
And then later, he still gives him another chance.
Yeah,
exactly.
because he's like begging him almost.
He's like, oh my God, Roland, don't do this.
Yeah, change your mind, man. You are being dumb here. Then my last note, also we have seen Roland's not particularly being the most cunning and smart character a few times so far throughout the story. He has admitted it, and we have seen it play out multiple times. He is not dumb, but we would not, I don't know if we would necessarily see him as a chess player necessarily. It wouldn't be one that would be particularly apt at chess. That is such a smart choice of King. If he were as cunning and think around corners type smart, along with all of his other abilities, he would be so much less interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
just think of like Sherlock Holmes. If Sherlock Holmes was like a big beefcake guy that could never be overpowered or beaten in any way physically, not as interesting.
And also even just like the loss of fingers when we're talking about modern day Roland, is it's like you need that. Otherwise, why would any of those other characters ever have a chance at sniffing his guns?
Yeah.
If he had both hands. And then it's one of those things, like when you're younger and you don't understand storytelling as much, you just want like the best of everything. I remember you being upset about the fingers and like, you know, like some of like Roland's like failings you kind of get mad at. You just want like him to be better, but it's like, really, no. Like,
it even goes past that with Stephen King. He's so good at doing it in other ways that it's not just Roland that gets a handicap put on him.
Yeah.
It's also the Ka-Tet. You were talking, yours was Susanna's. You're like, there's no way they can go through this series with someone with no legs. Like, you were expecting it to be fixed like the next subchapter or something like that.
And this book.
Or in this book,
Wizard and Glass. Oh, Wizard. That's the one that can
there
fix it.
There we go. That's where it's going to happen. Yeah, everything like that. Baraki says, first time I read that part, I hadn't any kids yet, and it didn't hit. Later, it hit so hard, and I can vouch for that, man. I can tell you, like, it's one of those things when you think your kid is going to get seriously hurt or is going to be dead, you react with fear, and that fear comes out looking like anger. And King is obviously a father by this point.
Yeah.
He knows how to write that.
A father that almost lost his kid, right? Wasn't Owen that almost ran into the street, and that's what sparked Pet Sematary?
That's what inspired Pet Sematary, exactly.
So
he knows exactly what it is. You get mad at that kid first, and then it's the, oh my God, you know, hug him and I'm sorry I got so mad, but you scared the hell out of me kind of thing.
And then later he gets mad at him for that latest Stand adaptation that Owen was a writer on.
Too soon.
All right, so subchapter 16. Moving on to subchapter 16. Susanna asks what the 6 words were, and he told them that the 6 words were, "I have known for 2 years." Oh man.
Damn.
Roland went on to tell them that his father told him he would be dead by nightfall if he went back to the palace, because Martin was determined to remove him as a threat, whether he passed his test or not. His father told him that he would send him away, but only for a little while, and he would go east instead of west. But he won't be going alone or without a purpose, or with a pair of sorry Prentice revolvers. Jake asked what purpose and which friends. Roland said that is what they must now hear. He also says how they judge him will come in time. So that's an interesting thought, too. The fact that he throws that in there, like how the Ka-Tet here is going to judge him.
That's literally what my note is about.
Based on this story. That's an interesting. I didn't have a note on that, but it's just kind of an interesting thing to throw in there where it's like, oh, maybe Roland's weight of this isn't just the weight of the story, but the worry of like,
what's going to happen. And he has alluded to that a little bit. He's like before, but this line here, and I just put my note here, and I'm just going to talk about it now. The anticipation built by Roland saying, "These things you must now hear, and how you judge me will come in time." It always gives me a chill, and it's just like, oh my God, like, all right, I'm going to tell you a story, Tad, and I hope we're still friends after it. That's basically what it sounds like here.
Yeah.
I hope you all don't turn on me and cast me away from the Ka-Tet, and Roland is thinking that this is going to break the Ka-Tet.
Yeah. He is, I mean, he could very well have that concern. Let's see. I just lost my place. Let me see if I can. Oh, there we go. Yeah, definitely an interesting, definitely an interesting line though. He saw, signed the sign, of a man with a hard task ahead, or side with a sigh of a man that had a hard task ahead of him, and threw more wood on the fire. He then began to talk, and talked the entirety of the queerly long night, not finishing the story of Susan Delgado until the sun was rising in the east, painting the glass castle in the distance with light of a fresh day.
That's a hell of a long time to talk.
Yeah. And that's coming from podcasters that I don't know what our record is. I think it's at least 5 hours.
I think someone looked it up one time. I think it is close to 5 hours.
No, I think it was over. I think we went over 5 hours. Yeah. There was one we did that was like a
marathon.
Yeah, an absolute marathon. I don't even remember the context for it, but it was a long episode. So I have to agree with Eddie's assessment of the 6 words. He said "Holy Christ," I said "Holy fuck." But those two things are about the same in terms of the way Tad equates it. Whoa. He knew for 2 years. That
is a haunting sentence to hear from your father.
Yeah.
Especially in this context that your mother's been taken.
Yeah.
Basically.
And so my note here. So my other note here. So in a matter of less than a day, Roland has been betrayed by both of his parents in one manner or another. Every kid has to face that moment of realizing their parents are not perfect, and they are just people. And that is a different time for everyone, certainly. But for Roland, it's all happening here in this 24-hour period,
and also
that's a rough one, because this has got to be as much of a slap to him or a stab of the heart as finding the shit with his mom. Like the fact his dad knew, like, come on, like that would be
and this isn't some little thing like realizing your dad is kind of a jerk, or your mom drinks a little too much or something like that. Like oh, she's got a little bit of a drinking problem. No, this is like full on like, oh my God, my mom could be hung for treason.
Yeah.
My dad is pitting himself against a man who, if he's known for 2 years, why hasn't he done anything? Oh, it's because this man is dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is like life and death shit. That's far more than like, I mean, we've both experienced it, realizing our parents aren't perfect.
Oh, everyone does. I mean,
yeah.
There was a quote, I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it. And there's a quote that I swear to God I've heard at some point where it's like, there comes the point that every kid becomes an adult is the day they understand their mother and father weren't perfect or something like. But I even Googled a few different versions and I couldn't find it anywhere. But I swear there was a quote that was something like that. Either way, it's a truth and a reality for sure. All right, so
you have one more note.
Let me go back up here. Sorry, I was going to the bottom. So Roland sighs here, showing that he is still showing that still, as we come to it, he may not be entirely ready to tell this story. He hasn't fully. I don't think he'll ever be fully ready. Right? It's kind of one of those things where it's like you're on the high dive, and it's like you're never gonna truly be like ready to jump, but you've just got to jump at a certain point. And I think that sigh kind of gives me that vibe a little bit.
And here we go.
Yeah, indeed. Let's see over in the chat. Baraki says it's the fear of real dangers that hit harder than the fears of things in the basement or the cosmic things. And yeah, I think especially more for parents for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's what we talked about. It hurts sometimes when you're there. You ready for me to go on? Because I can read that stuff.
What?
The part 2.
Oh yeah, so yeah, now we're like I said, we kind of figured that we would have to jump into. So now we're jumping into part 2. So this book has, I don't remember how many parts. I guess I can pull it up and look. So we got 4 parts to this book. So we are now complete through the first part. We're now moving to the second part. The second part is subtitled Susan. And we are going into chapter 1, which is Beneath the Kissing Moon. And then, of course, subchapters, diving into subchapters because this is Stephen King, and there are generally always subchapters. So, that is. And then this, we talked about this to start off too, but there was 5 chapters in part 1, and then there's 10 chapters in the 2 middle sections, and then 5 parts in the last one. So there's 2 little 5ers, beginning and end, and then there's 2 10 chapter things in the middle. So that's kind of where we're at. We're diving now into the second section titled Susan.
All right, subchapter 1. We get a perfect disc of silver called the Kissing Moon in full earth, hung above the Ragged Hills 5 miles east of Hambry, 10 miles south of Eyebolt Canyon. Below the hill, the late summer heat still held, suffocating even 2 hours after sundown. But here atop the coups, it was as if reap had already come, and with strong breezes and frost-pinched air. The woman that lived here with nothing but a snake and 1 old muty cat was going to be a long night for her. She waits until the hoofbeats of her first visitors' horses fade away, sitting by the window quietly with her 6-legged cat on her shoulder and a lap full of moonlight. 3 horses bearing away 3 men who called themselves Big Coffin Hunters.
Which is, I believe, one of the terms that Roland said in his delirium earlier in the book. So, also I wanted to read Baraki's last note as well with the last chapter. Makes me wonder why Stephen never told Roland what he knew about Gabrielle. I guess to protect him from Martin, but Stephen must have known that Roland would have noticed after all of his training. Is that even a given? You know, because he talked again. He even just said it there. We've seen throughout the series. Roland is not necessarily the sharpest knife in the toolbox there.
It took a basic slap in the face for him to figure it out.
Yeah, and so I guess what I push back on Baraki a little bit there is just to say, did Stephen really know if Roland would ever catch on? Was
he kind of hoping that he wouldn't?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe he was just kind of hoping that, Roland would be so fixated. And also, he also, I don't think, believes that Roland was going to become a gunslinger at this point, right?
Yeah.
He's 14. I'm thinking he probably, and what did Court say? You're early by 2 years at least?
At least.
So, and I think that Stephen, at some point, we found out or will find out that Stephen was made a gunslinger at 16, and he was the youngest before Roland. So yeah, he's at least 2 years early. So maybe even Stephen doesn't say anything because, one, Roland isn't the most observant, and then 2, he's a couple years away from actually getting his gun. So
which means he's occupied with his studies and with training and everything like that. So he's not going to notice anything.
Yeah.
In that time, I'll be able to deal with the situation, kind of thing.
Yeah, and let's be honest. Would Roland have ever noticed had Martin not pulled him into that room?
That's what I'm saying, is it took a basic slap in the face to figure it out.
Yeah.
He didn't even figure it out. He was shown it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a purposeful thing. Martin was trying to draw him out ultimately. So I wonder if that's where Stephen's mind was at, is 1, I've got some time. 2, my kid's not necessarily the most, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right way to put it, because I always feel like we're portraying Roland as dumb, and it's definitely not that. It's just that he's not maybe the most creative thinker, and not good at thinking around corners. I don't even know how else to phrase that, but that's just what he is. So it's I think someone like that would be easy for them to maybe miss something like that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I would love to get more from Mr. Stephen Deshane.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so then jumping back to where you left off here, saying the big coffin hunters. So what do you got notes wise here?
Quite a picture we're already being painted here. First time reading it, I remember not liking this at all. Like a hill, it's cold. We got a woman with a muty cat. Like
Yeah.
no.
Now, did you see that as a negative?
A muty cat?
Yeah, because in the world of like we've seen in like Roland's like not like threaded stock my ass
when the world had moved on.
Yeah,
Back where this story's taking place, the world hadn't moved on yet.
It's in the sense of moving on. Though.
No, every sense we got from Gilead and everything like that, everything was perfectly fine. There was some war and stuff like that, but we never got a sense that there was like muties and stuff like that living with people. Also, who owns a snake?
Hey, I've owned many snakes in my life.
I rest my case, Your Honor. I mean,
they're fun animals.
Meeting with someone who calls themselves the Big Coffin Hunters. No,
Your daughter wants a snake, sir.
that's true, but she doesn't own one. Not yet.
At least you're not all like freaked out by it in terms of like, I don't want one in my house. No. Freaks me out. Some people are like that. So
Especially if I know that it's not venomous, I'm not going to care.
yeah.
I'm that oh, a spider's near me. Oh shit, is it venomous? No? Oh, okay, smash it with my hand kind of guy.
Yeah.
I get that little freak out jump, well, just like everyone else. I'm not going to lie about it, but it's that unknown, like, oh god, poison, venomous. Oh, it's not. That's just oh, come here.
Yeah. Yeah, and Brocky says, okay, Stephen might have been right to doubt Roland that he would have noticed, but he should have known Martin may have showed him something in order to goad him, and that's definitely something that he should have considered. But yeah, I mean, then again, Stephen does say that.
Do you think that Stephen maybe underestimated Martin a little bit there? Is that, there's no way he's going to go after my son.
At least not yet. I wonder if the age of Roland is really the
deciding factor
thing there. Yeah. Like maybe even 15, the next year, maybe even he'd be a little bit more.
I got to talk to him in a little bit, but not 14. Clearly not 14. No one's ever even done it at 15 or 14. I got to worry about it when he gets close to 16.
Gets
That's
closer to it.
Or I have to resolve the situation before that by myself.
Exactly. And also the other part of it is we can't even assume that Roland's going to make the trial at 16. Because when we find out that Stephen was the youngest at 16, again, he's the youngest. It's not like, hey, 16, it's like your driver's license. You have your trial manhood at 16. No. Stephen was kind of an outlier to get it at 16. So,
everyone else has waited longer than that.
I bet you anything what it was Stephen was kind of pacing Roland's growth. And he kind of knew at a certain point, if we don't resolve this farce and Martin shenanigans, because he knows this is all tied together in some way. If we don't resolve it outside of things, I'll have to bring Roland in. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
He's too young.
There's a scene in Harry Potter very much like this where it's like, 11's too young. 12 is obviously too young. 13's too young. 14's too young. Oh, shit, it got exposed. It's one of those things that happens with parents. It's like, okay, when am I going to talk to my kid about that? There's even like ad campaigns dedicated to like, hey, don't wait to talk to your kids about the effects of alcohol and tobacco and and everything. Talk to them beforehand so they know. And it's one thing that a lot of parents, especially religious ones, refuse to do because, they're children. We can't talk to them about that. The problem is that you get exposed to stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Roland kind of slipped into that trap, is that he's like, no, I got time.
Yeah,
I got that. I got a couple of years at least.
And here's the other part of it is, let's not fall out of the equation, is the cunningness of Martin.
Yeah.
Like Martin, maybe he is so dastardly of a person that he undercut age-wise so far to 14 because it was so unthinkable that no one's going to see this coming. You kind of build that element with any, whether it's a movie or a book or a TV show, whatever.
Well, also,
with those villains that are able to just like really like undercut everyone without them realizing it. That was what makes some of the best people like villains. So that it could even be that. Even we don't know. There's a lot we're kind of.
Well, also on top of that, I know we're jumping back a little bit, but it is an interesting conversation. I want to have it. Is that, Stephen also admitted that Martin was going to have him dead regardless. Like, this was a full plan. This wasn't some whim that Martin had and everything like that. He said he says
no. I know, but I think what he's saying though is he's saying that if you go back to the palace, you're dead. Because K, you threw his plan to sixes by actually winning your trial. He intended you to fail and be sent west, but if you go back to the palace, he's going to kill you. Like his ultimate thing is you got to be out of the picture. You fucked his first plan. He's just going to kill you now. So we've got to get you out of here, basically. So
I think that there's more to it than that. I don't think that it's just a passing something that Steven's brushing under the rug about it, and that Martin didn't have anything planned. I think I think you're underestimating his slyness. He absolutely has contingency plans. What if Roland does pass his test? In the off chance that he does at 14, what are we going to do if he does? Because it's Martin.
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
I think you're underestimating him.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, but I can't see Gilead being so insecure that Martin would be able to kill the son of the lead gunslinger, Stephen Deschain's son, who just passed his trial in the palace, in their home, without having something in place. He's not going to be able to pull that out of his ass. There's going to be something.
Now who's underestimating?
No, I'm not underestimating him. I think you're underestimating Gilead. What Martin isn't doing is he's not underestimating Gilead. He has something planned for Roland. It's either west, dead, or assassinated that night. Either he's killed in the trial, he's defeated in the trial and sent west, or he's murdered assassinated in the palace. There's no way that comes on a whim, and it's just like, okay, well, we got to figure out a way to kill him. Nuh-uh. There is something planned. There's a plan B there. I'm telling you.
Maybe.
I'm telling you.
Maybe. I don't think I think it's so illogical that he could actually pass the trial at 14. I mean, even court was like, you're throwing everything away. You're done. So I think really what it comes down to is there's no chance, and the Roland did it, so now it's just a matter of and that's why Steven's ultimately inserting himself here, because it's like, if you end up back at the palace, you're fucked. Like he'll just openly kill you. Even if it is that, he needs you off the board basically, and you fucked him over, and you almost got lucky that you went and slept with a chick instead of just going back to your room or whatever, because you might, maybe
already be dead.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting though. Palace intrigue, I love it. Let's see. So now we're back to the hill here. Let's see. So my note here is I have told on the roundtables before this is my favorite book, but the first time through I hated it. I think I even said that maybe in our intro episode. This is too early for that to have set in yet, because I thought that the flashback portion might just be a few chapters and then maybe intercut with other stuff that is happening now, quote unquote, in the story. So I just wanted to at least give context to that, because I think I've said multiple times that as this story progressed and I realized this entire book pretty much is flashback, I was none too happy.
There's the story that you have told. Again, one of those stories I like to retell or have you retell is that you get into the flashback and you're like, wait, how long does this go? And you keep flipping forward.
Flip forward to each new chapter and see, does it say Susanna and Eddie? Or does it say
the characters that we're about to be introduced
to? Exactly. And it's just when it wasn't, I was just
oh God, how long does this go?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it should have been given away, Tad. At the end of the last subchapter, it says he talks all night.
Yeah, but
so
we also
it tells the whole story.
We also, in the course of the last 3 books, have gone through 4 months of time.
It's
too.
true.
So books are fun that way, because books can be very elastic with time.
This is true.
All right, so and then
one more.
This is quite the setup of images and tone, for sure. I almost feel like you could hear the evil music in the background,
or the wind.
Yeah, you know what it always reminds me of though, the house on the hill above the town. It always reminds me of the Grinch.
The Grinch. Yeah. There.
Just up on the mountainside, cut off from everyone else. And I know there's all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, even a Marston House in Stephen King's realm. So it's a common thing for sure. But it always just reminds me of the Grinch, because I love that.
Jack has his house set up away from Halloween Town, in Nightmare Before Christmas. He's the Pumpkin King after all, so.
That's what they say.
Oogie Boogie's off on a hill.
living in the moon.
Living in the hill, underneath it, and everything. And in the moon, that's as high as you can get, right? Up in the sky. So the woman snorts and thinks how funny men are. The funniest thing about them is how little they know. Men who are so proud of their muscles and their little names that they call themselves and their drinking or eating capabilities, and so everlastingly proud of their pricks. Even in these times, she thinks that when most men can't shoot anything but bent seed that produce children only fit to be drowned in the nearest well. There's a happy thought. She thinks how men are cowards because it's never their fault, right? Women's womb, women's problem. Men are cowards, such grinning cowards, and the three that had just ridden away were no different. The one with the limp might bear watching, as he had a clear and everly curious pair of eyes, but still didn't see anything she couldn't deal with. And then here's a quote from the book for this character, who we have no name for yet.
No.
Says, men. She could not understand why so many women feared them. Hadn't the gods made them with the most vulnerable part of their guts hanging right out of their bodies? Like a misplaced bit of bowel? Kick them there and they curled up like snails. Caress them there and their brains melted. Anyone who doubted that second bit of wisdom only needed to look at her knight's second bit of business. The one which still lay ahead. Thorin, Mayor of Hambry, Chief Guard O'Barony. No fool like an old fool. I have my notes here just, whoa. That's a lot to unpack here, what we got. So we got a woman by herself on a hill, just got visited by three men named the Big Coffin Hunters.
Yeah.
One of which has
Snake.
a limp,
Yeah.
has a snake, has a muty cat, and it's cold up there, like windswept and cold, and it's the end of the... It's
Now we got a mayor.
Now we got a mayor who apparently is
Is
an
old.
idiot and old. So,
Yep.
woo!
So, Mino, have we seen enough about Roland's World to see the patriarchal nature of the world, that it's clearly a thing? I mean, I know we've talked about no female gunslingers, but I think this is the first real indication that this is, in fact, a male-dominated society. Because, I mean, you can't assume. Especially in fantasy.
Blood wasn't, Toll wasn't led by a man. It was led by a woman, Sylvia Pittston.
Yeah.
So
and
River Crossing.
So
and Talitha.
like,
so
yeah,
it's like
ultimately there hasn't been a clear indication that you have like that really patriarchal hierarchy in this world until now. This section you just covered is the first indication that because again in fantasy and sci-fi, like there's times they flip it on their heads and it's like female driven.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, matriarchal. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a new wrinkle.
But we
to
do
the whole
also
thing.
have to make sure that we're distinguishing too when we're reading through this, is that we have to understand this isn't Roland's world. This isn't the world that Eddie, Susanna, and Jake are aware of right now. This is a go. This is then
certainly
kind of thing.
Yeah,
this is the world that was before the world moved on.
Yeah, and that's why I almost didn't even take into account all the stuff we've seen already, because this is going to the past potentially before the world moved on.
Exactly.
So the fact that just what she's saying there kind of gives you that idea that yes, men do still kind of have the power in this world. It isn't one of those like reversals.
Yeah.
Because again, you get those.
It is a very clear establishment there in that first, like, I think it's like 3 or 4 paragraphs, establishing exactly like what you're talking about with the patriarchy. It's like, oh, okay, men are in charge.
Yeah.
Why are women afraid of them? Doesn't matter. Men are in charge. Kind of thing.
And then also it establishes that the mayor is an older person. So we're getting some clues dropped on us for sure.
Yeah, and so going on, none of these thoughts had real power over her. Not like the marvel these men who call themselves Big Coffin Hunters had brought her. She will look at it and fill up her eyes with it. The gimp, Jonas, had insisted she put it away. He had been told that she had a place for such things, and he didn't want to see any of her secret places, gods forbid. The other two with Jonas, DePape and Reynolds, had laughed like trolls, and so had she, actually. But now that their hoofbeats had been swallowed by the wind, she would do as she liked. The girl whose tits had stolen what was little left of the heart Thorin's mind wouldn't be here for another hour at least. The old woman had insisted the girl walked from town, citing the purification value of such moonlit heels in tow, but truth was that she wanted a buffer between the girl and the Big Coffin Hunters. And during that time, she will do as she likes. So not only a secret hiding place, but several, actually. Not suspicious at all that someone has several hiding places, And then...
Most of us do one way or another, right?
Yeah, and then we got names for the big fellas, the Coffin Hunters. We got the Gimp Jonas, we got DePape, and Reynolds. And they all laugh like trolls.
Yeah. In the chat, David says there's a song called Witchy Red by Dr. John. It always makes me think of this part.
Oh.
And then Baraki says the men control the world and the women control them. It's always been so.
Yes. Well, it's like she said, caress him there and the minds melt.
Yeah, indeed.
You know? We've seen it. Hell,
Yeah.
we're about to see it again in a month or so with Napoleon, that movie about him with Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
Did you watch the new trailer for that?
No, not yet.
Oof, it's
Not
good.
yet.
It
Not
looks
yet.
good.
So also my note, the gimp she called Jonas, sneaky little character trait dropped in there in passing.
King's great at that, isn't he?
Love that little slide in there. And then the girl who stole the mayor's mind and purification values. The picture is not totally clear yet, but it is starting to clear.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yep, and so going on, she says the thing is so beautiful, even though through the box, she could feel the glam. This is talking about the box when she received it from Jonas. I guess I didn't make that perfectly clear. It also is a little unclear in the book itself.
Yeah.
So we'll just follow with us. She says that it's beautiful like her cat, Musty, and picks up the cat from her shoulder and puts it down. Thinking of the thing gives her a certain heat in the place where her ancient bow legs come together. Gross. The cat goes towards the fire, and the extra legs and the split tail produce a horrible shadow on the wall. The woman goes to fetch the thing that Jonas had given her. She remembers what Jonas had told her. Lose that, and you'll lose your head. Never fear, my good friend, she had told him. So she goes into her bedroom, and at the foot of her bed, she kneels and passes one hand over the dirt floor there. Lines appear in the sour dirt and form a square. She puts her fingers into one of these lines, and it gives to her touch. Lifting the panel, she reveals a compartment about a foot square and 2 feet deep. Within it is an ironwood box, and sitting on top of the box is an emerald green snake. Okay, so we got Kitty, who's a mutie, and here's the snake. She picks it up, it yawns, and inside of its mouth is 4 sets of fangs. She sticks out her tongue and takes 2 drops of venom from the snake. Enough to kill a dinner party if mixed with punch, she says. And it burns going down like a strong drink. For a moment, the room swam out of focus and she heard voices murmuring. She calls these the unseen friends. Then she blew out a breath and the room steadied and the voices faded. What the fuck?
Oh, very interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rocky said, "Gods, there's so much this part that is makes me so uncomfortable."
Especially
when
when,
it's so uncomfortable.
when you're diving into it a little bit deeper like this. I'll tell you right now, doing my prep, I got chills like 3 or 4 times. Like, bleh. Not all good chills, like happy. Some of these were like eerily creepy shit. Like my note here reminds me of the stories like the Princess Bride, where they build up tolerances to poison.
Yeah.
And then the snake seemed like it was guarding this box a little bit, like it was under the panel, but inside on top of the box. So it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. My note, and the lines appearing and then turning into a compartment when they're touched a certain way. This is not making the makings of just a kind old woman on the hill.
No. Also, what good comes from voices from unseen friends? I mean, does that ever turn out well for anyone ever?
There's nothing wrong with voices.
Is there? Is there? I've got friends on the other side.
I mean, look at Jack. He wasn't lonely in that hotel.
Yes, he was. Very lonely. And that's why he needed friends.
He had lots of friends.
Who let him out of the freezer.
Like Lloyd.
No.
And Grady.
Oh, gosh, no. Definitely. That's a hard no. So she kisses Ermont, which, spoiler, that's the snake, between his lidless eyes. Time of the kissing moon, all right, she thinks. Then sets him aside, and he slips beneath the bed and curls up, watching. She passes her hand over the ironwood box and feels her arms quivering. And a heat in her loins starts up hotter than before. What?
I think of you with this because I can just imagine your reactions. So I just love that you ended up with this subchapter.
Thanks, Ted. You did this on purpose, didn't you?
No.
I don't believe you. I think you did this on purpose.
No, I mean, because we already told everyone we actually fell short last episode. So a couple things we prepped last episode moved into this episode, subchapter wise.
But I asked you in text last night when we were prepping. I said, "Hey, am I the odds or the even subchapters? And you're like, oh yeah, you're definitely the evens. I'm the odds, or vice versa.
Well, you could you just go look at our notes and how we take the notes. You could tell who writes what.
I don't believe you.
Yeah,
I think you switched things.
No,
because you saw that I was not going to have the subchapter.
It makes me so much happier when it just happens.
It's just a happy accident.
Oh, indeed. But go on with the heating of her loins.
The box was locked and no key was given, but that didn't matter to her. Shut up, Ted. That didn't matter to her. She stretched out one hand toward the lock, which was inlaid with an eye and a motto in the high speech that said, "I see who opens me." And then she withdrew her hand. All at once, her senses grew sharper, and she could smell not only the room, which was pretty rank, but herself, and it wasn't pleasant. She wouldn't open it here. She would open it under the kissing moon where the air was clean. And then the last line here, I got a quote. Rhea of Coos Hill pulled the box from its hole with a grunt, rose to her feet with another grunt, this one from her nether regions. Tucked the box under her arm and left the room. God damn it, Ted, I hate you. I'm not reading any more things that talk about someone's nether regions.
I mean, Ka will tell if that's the truth or not. I really wish.
Disgusting.
I really wish I planned it. I really do. I wish I could take credit. Oh,
I hate you so much.
That fate is so much more evil than I am, sir.
And Baraki says it in the chat. Hashtag Ted is terrible. Baraki says, we get far too much Rhea's nether regions in here. So apparently her name is Rhea of Coos Hill.
We'll have to remember that name. We'll watch her career with great interest.
I'm going to walk out, dude. You're going to have to finish this section by yourself.
Go on with your note. We're almost done with it.
We are, but subchapter 2 is still coming.
Don't say coming. Oh. Oh man, go on with your note.
For those of you listening to the audio podcast, I just face palmed into my microphone when he said that. Like, full on, just buried my face. I can't. Tad, I can't.
Oh, man. I did not foresee this, but
he is so red right now from laughing at me.
Oh, I'm not, like, side hurting yet, but we're getting close. I gotta compose myself here.
God, Tad. My note. Why does this feel so ominous, so bad? Like uneasy feeling. We got a cat, a snake, an old woman, a hidden thing that has a powerful pull to it just from touching the box that it's in. Like, we don't know anything that's going on, and already I'm just like, I don't like this.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. In the chat, snake in a box. That's another.
It's my snake in a box.
Oh, man.
Brocky says, best book club ever.
I don't know. It's going off the rails here. Good thing we're almost to the end.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, if we had if we had any hopes of this just being a kindly old woman who likes solitude, it's quickly vanishing.
Right?
Like, it's just
anyone who becomes immune to snake venom like that is just
yeah. Your last note.
Yep. Should I read it? Should I wait?
You have to.
Do you need a minute?
No, you have to read it.
The whole subchapter. Just ew. Just yucky. Just ugh. I need a shower after reading that.
So does she.
Oh God, Ted.
Oh my God. Oh, I gotta compose myself. You're face palming. I love it. I love it. Whenever I can get that reaction out of you, and you're turning red too. Talking about red, you're the one.
Oh, I'm gonna vomit.
All right, so subchapter 2. This will be our last subchapter that we're covering for this book club.
If you can get through it.
Yeah. All right, so the hut was down the hill enough to be spared from the bitter winter winds, which were ever present from reaping to wide earth. A path led to the hill's highest point, and beneath the moon it appeared silver. The old woman toiled up it, breathing heavily, while her mutant cat followed. At the top of the hill, the wind that she could. At the top of the hill, through the wind, she could hear the whisper of the thinny that was in Eyebolt Canyon. She knew that most hated the sound of it, but she loved it. To her, it sounded like a lullaby. Which that's a fun thing after what we've already established with thinnies, with Roland and Eddie and Suzanne on the other. In the present, thinnies aren't necessarily wonderful sound, but she seems to love it. So another mark against her. The moon above had a shadow on it that sketched the face of two kissing lovers, if you believe the fools below. Those fools saw different faces on each full moon, but she knew there was only one, the face of the demon, the face of death. But she had never felt more alive.
Don't read chat.
So a lot of great world building here. We're getting a sense of the nearby town. We had mention of a mayor. We could see this old woman lives up the mountain. We've established that the thinny, we already know because of Roland's reactions that the thinny probably plays into this story somewhere. But now we actually know exactly where it's at, Eyebolt Canyon. Also showing plenty about this woman.
Too much, unfortunately.
Oh. What do you got?
Just building more on what we saw in the last few sub-chapters. Not even here, but also going back into with like Roland and the original Ka-Tet and everything like that.
Yeah, in Kansas, the thinny and
the
stuff.
Thinny and stuff like that. We're just building more and more off of what's already been given in this book.
Yeah. So she touches the lock, and a red light showed between her fingers, and the box opened. Rose-colored light, dimmer than the moon, but infinitely more beautiful, came from the box. The light touched her weathered face, and for a moment made her face look like a young girl again. The cat sniffed, and she shooed the cat away, saying it was not for the likes of it. The cat hissed and stalked to the peak of the hill. Inside the box, in a drawstring bag, was a glass globe pulsing with a rosy light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The old woman took it out and said, "Oh, ye live, so you do." The ball turned more towards Scarlet and thrummed in her hand. The old woman felt the wetness between her legs, and she thought she had left, or that she thought she had left her long ago. Peter with the old lemon face, huh? Oh, man. Oh, so some witchiness here. And the ball is glowing and alive. This doesn't seem good.
No, and I just going along with that, my note, someone old being shown as young again. It just reminds me of too many fairy tales. Oh, like, yeah, so this is what's going to make me young again and pretty, and
or even
very
just,
much like Mother Gothel from Rapunzel.
Yeah, or what about like even just the fairy tales where like the older person disguises themselves to look younger.
Yes.
So then when the shoe drops and they reveal their hideous face.
Mm-hmm.
So
like the Beauty and the Beast is one I know. One I know that you've seen. I know you haven't seen Tangled, the newer Disney film.
Yeah.
But like Beauty and the Beast, you got the old woman who brings I'll pay you with a rose, and then poof, she's beautiful. Like that kind of thing. That straight out of a fairy tale for me.
Yeah, indeed. Robert says you guys are off the rails when Carol isn't around.
Yeah.
Was it Carol here earlier though?
I don't think so.
I thought I saw her.
No, we had Chris here.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought I saw her earlier. But okay, so the thrumming died and the light of the globe furled up like petals and through a pinkish gloom with 3 riders coming out of it.
That's too many female things in that description.
I wish it was intentional. At first she thought it was the men who had brought her the ball, Jonas and the others, but no, these were younger than DePape even, who was 25. The one on the left had a bird skull mounted on the pommel of his saddle. Then the ball made the 2 on the outside vanish and leave just the one in the middle. Rhea looked at the jeans and boots he wore and the flat-brimmed hat that hid the upper part of his face and the ease with which he rode his horse, and her first thought was gunslinger, come east from the inner baronies, perhaps from Gilead itself. But she did not have to see more than the lower part of his face to see that he was little more than a child, and there were no guns on his hips. But she did not believe that he was unarmed. If she could only see better, she moved the ball almost touching her nose and asked for it to show her a closer view. She didn't know what to expect, but the figures in the ball did float closer, and she saw a quiver of arrows on his back and a bow on the pommel of his saddle, where a gunslinger might carry a rifle scabbard. he was not of the old people, but she didn't think he was from the outer arc either. She asked who he was and how she was going to know him. With his hat pulled down that far, she could not rightly see his face or his eyes. Then the cat distracted her by getting too close again, and she shooed it away and tried to kick at it a few times. And the ball went dark when she looked back at it. She yelled at the cat for causing this, and then she heard something coming from the path and realized the reason the cat was acting that way was the girl was coming, and early. She grimaced. She hated being caught by surprise, and the girl would pay for it. She put the ball back in the box. So yeah, that's this little chunk here. My notes here. So this thing that she has just been given is a crystal ball, and it's already showing stuff to her. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Crystal balls. Those are always not evil things, right?
No, never.
Also, the addition of the crystal ball to this world, it's an interesting addition, but it doesn't feel out of place since King Arthur is already a foundational piece of this world, and Merlin had a crystal ball. So to me, if it's new entirely, but it feels exactly right for this story. This feels true. To the
going along with that, another one that I have is the cat had intelligence to recognize that her master was entranced and needed to be warned. That also just fits the image of like Rhea so far, that what we've seen of her is, snake, spider, old woman living on a hill, has powers. Like you said, I think it's in this subchapter, the one that I was covering, very kind of witchy a little bit. Like having a cat warn her.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she's doing a potion.
Yeah.
Oh, there's someone coming. Oh, good kitty. And she quickly hides it so that
it's
they
not
can't
like
see
Lassie.
it.
See, good people rely on like Lassie and a dog.
Like a dog.
But
witches rely on cats.
To have cats being the one that tells you. Because, cats, I love cats.
I do too.
But cats are not the most helpful creatures.
No, they are not.
So,
they are not easily trained either. There's a reason that the phrase is, man, that was tough, like herding cats.
Yeah, exactly.
Not herding dogs, herding cats.
Yeah, dogs do the herding.
That's right. They can be trained.
Also, so then going on, of course, I assume that this is Roland, since it is a gunslinger, or at least she thought so, but she excuses him as being a gunslinger because of his youth, but we obviously know that Roland is a young gunslinger. So based on context clues, I'm guessing this is Roland that she's looking at. So great, he is going to an area with a crystal ball and what might be a witch.
Exactly.
Feeling very
and
witchy.
Just adding on to your suspicion that this might be Roland, we also just heard a couple sub-chapters back that he did win his gunslinger.
Yeah, so
he is a gunslinger.
Yeah, we know he's a gunslinger for
and
sure.
she's suspecting gunslinger.
Yeah, for us,
if the shoe fits, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck.
Yeah, for us, it's not much of a jump, but for her, she obviously has issues there.
Yeah.
So then the singing voice of the girl rises up again, singing a song from our world called Careless Love. The old woman says that she will give her careless love, and she would make her pay for walking in on Rhea, early on Rhea. She tried to lock the lock, but it wouldn't lock. She figured that she broke it with her over eagerness to open it with the touch. She is raging at the voices as she messes with and thinks about the lock on the box. It hurts her to close it because the ball was coming to life again as she closed the lid of the box. She thinks to herself that she has to restrain herself from doing anything too bad to the girl because she was here because of the mayor, and he had the old law on his side and power. And then she thought about Jonas, if he knew that she had opened the box and used the ball, but stopped worrying. Possession was 9/10 of the law anyway. She lifted the box under an arm, hoisted her dress, and ran back to her hut. Her cat ran after her, or ran behind her toward the hut. So definitely not one we'd expect to be running either. But I do find the image comedic.
Yeah,
the old lady like hitching up her.
Do you know what character I picture with this so far?
Who?
The one from. Did you ever see Sword in the Stone when you were a little kid?
Yeah, a long time ago.
There's the witch in that with like red hair and a pink dress and.
Oh yeah, yeah, indeed.
That's what I always pictured the first time reading this. It's just like that image and everything.
Yeah. Another interesting musical crossover to our world, not to mention all the other non-musical things that cross over from our world to this one. But yeah, I guess it doesn't have to just be the Beatles to cross over.
Nope.
So Rhea is not at all happy to be interrupted. I do not think that being on the a bad side of one such as this is a great strategy in life.
Yeah. She's crafty, isn't she?
Oh, yeah. Seeming very crafty.
Already we're getting like a sense of how crafty she is. She broke into a box that has no key. The snake venom made her hear voices and stuff like that. but also just like her logic here that you covered. She thinks to herself she has to restrain herself from doing anything too bad to the girl.
Yeah.
Because she is here because of the mayor who has the old law on his side and power.
Yeah.
So even though we're getting a hint of like witchiness, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
she still has to be careful with this girl because she has connections to the mayor.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, okay. There's a cunning.
Yeah,
side
she's not
here.
she's not a fool for sure.
Exactly.
So, that is it though. So we are going to move on to the
Warning, spoilers ahead. Warning, spoilers ahead. Warning, spoilers ahead.
So we are now in the spoiler section. If you have not finished the 7 primary books of the Dark Tower series, now is the time to check out. If you finish the series and want to come back and listen to this, feel free. But if you go on any further and you have not finished, it is on you if you get spoiled. So Baraki mentions in the chat, when I read this enough times, I realized that the Bends of the Rainbow is the real villain of the story among other evil ones. What it chooses to show and when it directs and how it directs others to many other events. That's true. It is quite the sinister device.
Do we ever see one that's good?
No, I mean even
we
just,
only see 2 of them. So
yeah.
the 2 that we see are definitely bad.
Yeah, I would assume there probably none of them are good.
It'd be interesting to see what King would do with the other.
That
11.
even goes to like Lord of the Rings, right? Because this is ultimately kind of King's riff on Lord of the Rings, and the Palantirs and Lord of the Rings are not good things.
Yeah.
Gandalf gives a whole speech to Saruman about using one. So, so the one I wanted to point out in the spoiler section, all that queerly long night he talked is the line. Not sure I ever noticed this small detail here. We know later that this night will basically feel unnaturally long to everyone, but I never noticed that King tips his hand about it here until
we even mentioned that a little bit earlier. Like I brought it up, dude, because your first time reading through, you obviously missed that line because you were talking about okay, this is going to be a few chapters.
Yeah, well, also, I mean, I don't even, not even now in the spoiler section, it's not even necessarily that it's a whole night, because a whole night could even be portrayed in a chapter. But the thing is there's a point in the midpoint of this story that it stops and goes back to Eddie and Susanna and all them. And I asked, like, how long have you been talking? Like, the fire's still going, but like it feels like it's been weeks. So there's like,
but they're not tired, they're not hungry, they don't have to pee.
Exactly, they're not sore from sitting even. So
on asphalt.
So yeah, exactly. So like, there's some unnatural witchiness involved here.
Not a fan of witchiness.
And King just tips his hand here with the line, and all that queerly long night he talked. That just is an easy line to just skip over, but on a reread, especially when you're paying attention, because I've reread it multiple times, I've never really caught that in the same way. But doing the prep for this, I was like, oh, that's a fun little.
One of the reasons why we're doing this is to catch lines like that, and that's where my spoiler section discussion comes in.
Yeah.
As Stephen DeShange says, and I'm quoting here, "It's only by the grace of gods and the working of Ka that you have not been sent west. One more true gunslinger out of Martin's Road, out of John Farson's Road, and out of the road which leads to the creature that rules them." I never caught the creature that rules them part before. I always focused on Farson and Martin because I'm so pissed at Martin because we got that story about how, he was fucking my mom.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to kill him, kind of thing. It always kind of comes down to that. And then, I guess Farson a little bit. Farson sent Martin.
Yeah.
So, he needs to fucking die too. But the creature that rules them. Creature.
Yeah.
Not man.
Yeah.
Dude, I've never caught that. Have you?
No. No, not until doing the prep for this.
Oh, my God. That is a huge revelation from King right here in book 4 about the Crimson King not being human.
And that's kind of a tease a little bit as well, because Roland, we find out later in this book, doesn't know about the tower. None of the kids do.
It's not until the grapefruit.
They all think it's a myth or a legend or something. And Roland tells them at the very end. Again, I just barely read this with my reread. So like they all know the idea of the Dark Tower as like a fairy tale or whatever, but the fact that it's real, that's not known to them. That's something that's kept secret by the gunslinger. So this line here is interesting in that context as well, where it's like, Stephen knows something that even Roland doesn't know. Yeah. So that's an interesting thing for sure.
Like I can't believe that I never caught on that before, because we've had discussions about the Crimson King.
Yeah.
Is he human? Is he not? And everything like that. We've always talked about, well, where did the spider come from and everything. Does Stephen give it away here that the Crimson King is not human?
Yeah.
He's a creature.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, you can call humans creatures too. Not good people usually. Usually, when you're calling someone a creature, they're.
I mean, is there more of a creature in this than him? I mean, he committed genocide.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of people you can probably call creatures for sure.
know.
But let's see. There we go. I was just looking at the screens and was confused. There we go. Yeah, no, but that's it though. I didn't really have a whole lot else in this section, spoiler wise. I mean,
That
there's
was the only one for me.
there's obviously a lot of stuff with like Rhea and stuff that we're going to come to learn. It's interesting to me because until now, I don't know if I realized how far he drug it out before telling us that she's a witch.
Yeah.
We've tried to allude around it as much in this book club as possible.
I don't think there's any way to pretend that she's not.
No,
you know?
exactly. And like honestly, like when you get to like the audiobooks, like Frank portrays her in no other way. So
Her voice is very much witch-like.
yeah, exactly.
That is not an impression of him. That is just my impression of a witch. So
yeah. So that is it for this episode. We are going to be back on the 18th of November for the next book club, where we'll pick up right here where we left
real
off.
fast, since we're talking about Rhea,
Disgusting.
I just have to establish that again, that she is fucking nasty.
I will say I don't know if we have as much sexual innuendo and sexual stuff with Rhea the rest of the way.
There was a
lot of-
talk earlier that Baraki asked us, "What are you two going to do when you get to the drop?" And I said, "Rhea isn't going to be there, so we're going to be fine." That's
When we get to what?
the drop with Roland and Susan.
Oh.
He's thinking that it's the sex stuff that's
Oh,
making
no.
me all queasy. No, it's not that. It's Rhea.
It's Rhea.
And then David said Rhea of the Cooch, and I just said, "Oh my god!" I just said, "David, ew."
Well, that's legit, right? A lot of people kind of miss that if they don't have that cultural context that coos is just
It
a
is a slang term for
yeah,
it. Yeah,
exactly. So
David, yes, that is gore. Absolutely, from the Mortal Kombat movie. It's one of the lines that Tad and I have quoted for 20 years.
I've quoted it since the movie came out. It's one of my favorite line reads from the entire movie, and
Yep.
I eventually got Peter looped into it as well. It's just one of my favorite. If I pretty much never say disgusting without saying it with that.
I say it in that connotation every time.
Indeed. So yeah, that is, we'll be back again on the 18th of November for book club part 7 for this. We'll pick up right where we left off. Then we have one more on the 16th of December, which will be the last one of the year, which is part 8, and then we'll be going into part 9 in January. So
Of 2024. What the fuck?
2024, yeah. And also, we at one point we were saying there was like the outside chance that the Traveler's Rest could happen this year.
No.
I think it was what we were finding is it would have actually been the first episode of January, but that was when we were doing the 3%. Now that we have to reduce down to a lower percentage because this is a bigger book, we probably won't get there till February or March, most likely, the Traveler's Rest. So can't wait for that though. Good stuff that just won our most popular moment.
We
in the
better
series.
take the entire episode for that section.
That's a long section. I was thinking about it as I was listening to it with my reread. I was like, this is a long section. So
We might have to for the first time, split a section in two.
well, yeah, we'll see.
We'll have to see when we get there.
It'll be fun. We'll have to try to get it to where it is the full episode
Yeah.
too. We don't like get to it at the tail end of an episode. We got to make sure
We'll do the entire. That's what I'm saying. The entire episode is dedicated just to the Traveler's
Yeah,
Rest.
we'll have to shoot for that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is that. If on the outro side, if you want to subscribe to us, you can do that on any podcasting server of your choice. You can stream us on Spotify. You can join us for the live streams here at youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. Like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications here on the YouTube side. We appreciate you all being part of the conversation,
Yes.
laughing with us, talking with us, adding to the chat. I always appreciate the emojis, which I did see at least a couple in here. I
want to
that.
throw it out there. I don't want to like over advertise our other show, but we are going to be talking a little bit about a Fall of House of Usher on Geekery Abides.
Yes.
I know that seems more like a King kind of topic because of Flanagan, but we're going to do it on Geekery Abides.
And we will have a conversation next Dark Tower Palaver
Yes.
through the paradigm of Fall of House of Usher, because Dark Tower should be his next big project.
Exactly.
Of course, there is the one other King project in between. But then also, if you want to support us, you can do that at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. And then Peter can tell you the ways to contact us, and we will sign out.
Send us an email, darktowerpalaver@gmail.com or show@darktowerpalaver.com. And then our social media, Twitter @darktowerpod, Facebook, facebook.com/darktowerpalaver, Instagram, darktowerpalaver, all one word, no spaces, tpublic.com/users/darktowerpalaver. Pick yourself up something that says #Tad is terrible.
And I'll drop a link in the chat there if you want to join us on our next live stream here in about 10 minutes or so. We'll be over there talking some spooky season stuff. So, Mark, we're going to be talking the tail end of the Geekery Abides. We're going to hit some overviews of House of Usher. We may do a deeper dive down the road sometime, but next Dark Tower episode, we're going to talk about the Dark Tower Flanagan adaptation in light of the House of Usher. Like, what has that changed for us? Because there was a lot of brilliant performances, and I think probably just geeking out about, oh my God, how good this was. What does this mean for what a Dark Tower Flanagan show is going to look like?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll have a lot more Usher talk upcoming because that's a big one. But yeah, we will sign off as we always do by saying long days and pleasant nights.
Long days and pleasant nights, folks.
All right, thank y'all in the chat. You guys are awesome. And we will see you in a fortnight for a roundtable. And let's cross our fingers that we get some sort of a Flanagan announcement between now and then. So we can not only talk about House of Usher and how it applies to Dark Tower, but maybe there's some official shit going on. We'll see you guys then.